Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. It's Thursday, May 14th, and we're gathered again for 4 hours, count them, 4 of negotiations this morning. Glad you could be with us. Jim and Dave, get us started, would you please?
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody. Let's start with the check-in. Same as before. Who are you? Position and district. How are you? Issues, elephants, expectation. And then last week was Teacher Appreciation Week. So tell us about a teacher that you appreciate, past or present. And let's start with Darren today.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Darren Oliver. My position is Silver Creek Elementary Principal. I'm doing fine. I like how that extra hour was snuck in earlier in the week for this meeting, but we'll make it happen. No issues or elephants. Expectations is to finish elementary plan time so I can sleep at night. And my favorite teacher, well, in my high school, my teacher's in the room right now. So Mrs. Walther, I think I've shared this, that she was my early childhood ed class teacher, and she's the one that directed me into the elementary world. So she was my absolute favorite in high school, next to my wrestling and baseball coaches. But as far as academic, it was Ms. Walther. And I'm not brown nosing, I'm just saying that. I've been very open with that, Mrs. Walther. So
Laura Mitchell.
Good morning. Laura Mitchell on the Board of Ed, and I'm good this morning. No issues or elephants. I do hope we can, make progress on elementary plan time, if not finish. We have some other things that hopefully we can get done as well. The teacher that I have really appreciated was Mrs. DiDonato at Westlake Middle School. She really took my daughter's dyslexia to heart and took the extra classes that were offered by the district so she could learn more about how to help her, and then took her on as her sort of project study for the second class, but just really worked hard with her to improve her writing skills, and apparently it was very successful, and she's doing great at Legacy and has great support system there too. So it's hard to pick just one.
Marty.
Marty McCarthy, principal at STEM Launch for now, and doing well. The teacher that came to mind was my chemistry teacher in high school. I went to high school in inner city Chicago, and Mr. Preston Hayes was, first of all, it's one of the coolest names ever. And then two, he was, I was somebody that could get by just by, showing up and taking the test and blowing everything off. But he really taught me how to work and not give up. And he was a fireball, and I loved him. So taught me a lot, and I'll never forget him.
Dave Luckley.
Good morning, Dave Lockley, Service President of DTA. I'm doing well this morning. It's much warmer on my patio today than it was last time we were in session, so I'm much more comfortable hanging out here. I don't have any issues or elephants at this time. I had no time constraints. And the teacher that came to my mind was my 9th grade English teacher, who's still in the district and gets embarrassed when I talk about him. So I will neglect to say his name on purpose, but my 9th grade English teacher, who was able to look past my own dyslexia and other issues, and was the first teacher to really recognize that I was able to, answer the questions and had depth of knowledge that other teachers just called me a slacker and didn't understand the issues that I was facing. And so he was the first one to really pull me out of that shell and convince me that I could be an academic success.
Laura Leppy.
Good morning. I'm Laura Leppy. I'm my voice is not awake yet, so I apologize that I sound like a 13-year-old boy right now. I'm great other than the sleep thing, and I have no issues or elephants and no time constraints. Let's do this 4 hours. And I would say that my math teachers, shocker, super cliche, were my people, but my AP Calc teacher in high school, my senior year, she's a fast talker, and she always knew what was coming, and she always knew what questions we would have. And I saw her over Thanksgiving for the first time in forever, and she's the same person. She's still like, she always said she never wanted children. She's got 3. She runs marathons. Like, she's just a crazy person, and she's kind of, my spirit animal besides Mel Brooks. And she really influenced my life and told me to be a math major, and the rest is kind of history, as they say.
Nancy.
I would have to say 2 teachers that came into my life my senior year were a husband and wife team. He taught band, she taught vocal music, and they influenced my life. They stayed friends my whole life. So Joe and Jane made a real difference in my music career. And I'm Nancy Leonard. Sorry, I'm going back. My position is I'm a retired principal. I'm feeling much better today. I have no issues or elephants, and I expect that we'll get through the early part of the agenda so that we can then get back to the elementary planning time.
Dorman.
My name is Dorman Land. I am a middle school teacher. I am well today. I don't have any issues or elephants. I expect things to happen today. I don't know where we're going, but I hope we get there. Teacher who you appreciate. There's just so many, but like in my own personal life as a student, I would guess Mr. Marlett Halstead. He was also my assistant scoutmaster. And so he helped guide and direct a lot of who I am today and the values that I hold and the love of the outdoors and all of that. So he had an extreme effect on me, and I really appreciate everything he did for me.
Heather Gracious.
Good morning, Heather Gracious, Director of Elementary for Student Support Services. I'm doing great today. I have no issues or elephants, and I just expect for us to continue to do the good work that we always do. My most influential teacher in a positive way, I have had a lot of both, but Mrs. Porter was my 2nd grade teacher, and she had polio when she was young, and the very best thing that we could ever do in her class was we would get to hold her hand when she walked down the hall, because she was pretty unstable still. And that was like my first entry into differences with people, and really having a lot of pride in being able to support her. So she made a huge influence on me.
Chris.
So I'm Chris, superintendent. I am feeling happy today. I had a chance to go to the senior car parade at Mountain Range last night, and that was a great time. Would love to see that tradition endure beyond the pandemic. Seeing kids standing through the little sunroofs on their cars, waving, people honking. It just was a high energy, positive place. Got another dose of it this morning. Today's my daughter's birth mother's birthday. And so we're celebrating it, but for the birth mom and making the choice that she did, we wouldn't have Michaela. So we went to Krispy Kreme and drove by Legacy on the way back and saw a graduate in her cap and gown walking in to get her picture taken. Lots of signs about congratulations, graduates out on the Legacy lawn. So that was inspiring. Then when I came in, I looked at my own diploma and I realized that 27 years ago today, I graduated from law school. One of the pictures I keep close is this one here. I don't know if you guys can see this. This is me with my daughter Megan on a law school graduation 27 years ago. So I'm just in a really happy spot for today. What else? I do think there are some issues we need to talk about related to planning time. We ended our last meeting in a tense place, and I think talking through some issues related to that will be helpful. I don't think it's a out of the gate sort of thing. I don't see anything related to where we ended that's going to compromise us working through the first 3 or so things on the agenda in a productive way, but I do think we need to spend some time talking through issues left out there from last time. Expectations is that we're going to have a really productive day. I trust the process. I trust this team. I'm confident, optimistic that we're going to get good things done. And in terms of teachers, I would shout out the 6th grade team at Century and the 8th grade team at Launch, who worked with my 2 younger kids in really productive ways. They just have that gift of seeing the good in the kids. It's a little bit of what Dave Lockley was describing with his 9th grade English teacher, who saw some of the talents that maybe some others hadn't seen because of other things that may have been covering them up or getting in the way. And both those teams, the 6th grade team at Century and the 8th grade team at Launch, have done that with my kids this year. And I'm just tremendously grateful for that.
Colleen.
Colleen Gardner, Shadow Ridge Middle School 6th grade math teacher. I'm doing well today. I don't think I really have issues or elephants. I do have an expectation that I'm kind of channeling Chris's last comment from our last meeting. Trust the process by following the process and being true to that process, and it will all work out. I have 3 teachers, bear with me, because they're at each level. In middle school, because I went to a middle school, even though it was junior high for most places back then. And that was Mr. Black. And he said, do you want to do advanced math or algebra? And I'm like, which one's harder? And he said, algebra. And I said, then that's what I want to take. And then in high school, I met Mr. Porter, who I had for almost all the time, because when you live in a small town, the same person teaches math to everybody, right? And he really made me love it even more. And then when I got to college, Dr. Zerger, I was like, I don't want to be a history teacher, even though I'm a psych major. I want to be a math teacher, so can you help me? And he rewrote my plan, and for a year, all I took was math classes. It was crazy, but I made it because of him, and so I'm really happy about that.
Oh.
Good morning, everyone. Bo Fobert, serve the district as Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction. I'm great today. Part of the reason I'm doing great is I realized we're going in this meeting and we needed some mojo. So I broke out the Horizon High School football jersey circa 1991. This right here is only worn when we need some extra strong mojo, and we need it today, and we're going to bring this thing across the finish line. So I broke that out today. It's never done me wrong. My kids they've never seen it this morning, so they're like, what is that thing? I had to go in the far reaches of the closet. So that's brought a little happiness to me as well this morning. I have no issues or elephants. Again, expectations, especially because I donned this today, is that we're going to have a great day as a team. I want to give a shout out because just a week away from my girls being done with their elementary journey, and the staff and leadership at Silver Creek Elementary have served them so well over the years. It's been just amazing. They're both, even though they come from the same mom and dad, very different kids, very different needs, and the staff, they're catered to them both and brought them so many good memories and have set them up well for the rest of their academic careers. So shout out to that group over there.
Heather Espinoza.
Hi, Heather. I teach 2nd grade at Woodglen. I am fine, thank you. No issues or elephants. Expectations of everyone to get through some good work today and do some good thinking along the way. A teacher that comes to mind, my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Woodworth, she kind of set me off on this path. And then I would say there's been so many educators along the way who continue to influence me today, but she would be the first one that comes to mind.
Shelley.
Good morning. My name is Michelle D-Rock. I teach 3rd grade at Meridian Elementary. I'm feeling good about today. I think that we can use the process to help us get to the finish line. And teachers that influenced me, my dad was an educator for more than 40 years. And I was often compared to him and told I looked like him, which was a little concerning when I was a kid because I was a girl. But I did always want to follow in his footsteps. It was something that I decided at an early age, and I was determined. I actually, when I was teaching high school, was able to teach with him. There were some odd moments in the hallways when I heard some students saying not to mess with Misty Rock, the English teacher, because her husband was the football coach. And I had to quickly correct that and say that he was my father instead of my husband. But I enjoyed teaching with him. He was obviously an influence, but I have others. Mrs. Allen, a second grade teacher, influenced me in a way that kind of confirmed my ideas early. And I saw her at a teacher rally at the Capitol about 100 years later, and she still recognized me. And I student taught for a teacher that I adored. I went back to my hometown of Longmont for my student teaching and got to teach with her. And she still sends me a teacher appreciation message every year for the last 30 years since I student taught with her. And another teacher that strongly influenced me is my colleague, Mrs. Weir, who helped me survive online learning with my deficit in computer skills. And so there's lots of people along the way who formed my career.
Deborah.
Deborah Blake, special education teacher, Arapahoe Ridge Elementary School. I am well today. Issues and elephants, well, I think they've kind of been addressed superficially, and I think we will. My expectation is that the process will take care of them. I agree with Chris and Colleen, trust the process will work. So that's my expectation. Teachers whom I appreciate. Sorry, not expecting that. I would say my high school drama teacher. I don't think he realized what he was doing, but it was an elective. I was never much of a student, came from educators, doctors, lawyers, and I never fit that mold, and took a drama class and had to do my first monologue, and the feedback from him set me on a path to find myself, which then took me back to education, which was my mother and my uncle and my aunt, her husband. So I don't think I could have made it without him. So he's my appreciation. Sorry. Wow.
Right.
Not at all.
Teresa.
Good morning, everyone. Teresa Barajas. I'm doing okay today. My allergies are acting up a bit, but I'm going to get through it. No issues or elephants, just expecting we get done with elementary planning. I actually was dreaming about elementary planning last night, and so been on my mind. I just appreciate, like I've had a really great experience for my daughter at North Glen High School. And my daughter has had sophomore and junior year, just emotionally. And Sherry Blunt, she goes above and beyond. She's super amazing. So I'm thankful that I selected North Glen High School as my daughter's high school. We looked at lots of schools, but Sherry said, hey, I know she'll do well here. I see her as the Norse, bring her down here. So we did, and I'm thankful for that. Her counselor, super amazing, helped us get through the sophomore and junior year, and we're on to senior year, so I'm pretty excited. So thank you to the North Glen High School staff. They're amazing.
Allison.
Allison Walter, a social studies teacher at Horizon High School. Bo, love the jersey, way to bring that out. I'm good. I am actually, yesterday had a really awesome day that I really needed to have because I've been kind of sad and missing my students, and they're working on this big project, and normally there's just tons and tons of back and forth, and I've been missing that, but this big project they work on, normally they have to engage with a level of government to kind of solve an issue, and this year I figured local government, there was just too much going on to try to be asking local leaders to, you know, help kids with whatever issue they came up with. So I just had them write a thank you note to a local leader instead. And 4 or 5 different students have actually gotten very quick responses back. Chris responded to one, and Jason Crow actually responded to another group, and the kids were just like sending me remind messages like, oh my God, they responded, they read our stuff, and they were so excited that a leader in our community, or even Jason Crow, like, you know, and they're like, Mr. Gudetsky emailed us back, oh my gosh. And so it was just really cool to know they were still getting super excited about what's going on right now, because they feel like there's just this disconnect and they don't always know what's going on with them. So that was really cool. So I had a very good day yesterday. I'm really happy. No issues or elephants, no expectations. I would love to hopefully get a little closer in the elementary planning time. Yeah, I'm starting to have like dreams about it too. So I'm with you guys. And then a teacher who I appreciate, I probably could pick one from every level. My 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Jurdy at Cotton Creek Elementary, was definitely one. And then when I got to college, I think it's funny, it was like the first teacher who ever made me cry was also my favorite. I was always like a fairly good student. And so I went to him and I was like, I'm just really struggling. And he's like, well, what are you doing about it? And I was like, I'm asking you for help. He's like, but what have you done? And I was like, nothing. He's like, okay, well, you can come to me and say you're struggling when you haven't done anything. And he kind of like handed it to me. I was like, okay. So I got my act together, and then I took several more classes with him. And by the time I graduated, you know, he'd really made an impact on me about like digging deeper within myself to figure out how to do better, instead of relying on other people to help me do better. And it's funny, I really needed to hear that as a college freshman, but yeah, one of my favorite teachers was the first to ever make me cry in front of them. So.
Linda.
Well, you realize I have to reach a long way back to figure out who my most influential teacher was. I could go all the way back to kindergarten, but I think I'll stay with high school. Mrs. Adams was my English teacher. I too went to a very small high school, so she was with me for 4 years, or I was with her, I guess. The other person I'd like to recognize is someone who helped my daughter a great deal at Legacy. His name is Daryl Clemenhager, and he worked with her so much on her writing skills that she began to realize things that she had not realized before in terms of her how her writing looked. So I have a deep appreciation for him. Oh, Linda Walther, sorry, retired counselor and teacher in the district. Great, thanks. No issues or elephants. Expectations are just to keep moving forward with this, and we'll get it done. And that's it. Thanks.
Sandy. Sandy, are you there?
Oh, I didn't hear my name. Sorry, and I
No,
lost
no.
track. Apparently, I can't do alphabet when it goes backwards.
Actually, Kathy, I called Sandy, but you go ahead while Sandy's getting ready. Go ahead,
Have
Kathy.
Sandy do it.
Okay, Sandy.
I didn't hear you say my name, Dave.
Evidently, I didn't say it very well because Kathy thought I said her. So, Sandy.
Okay. Hi, Sandy Sorensen, North Sun High School. I'm doing fine today. No issues, elephants. Expectations, just like others have said, just want to get back to that elementary plan time and wrap it up and help ourselves all sleep a little better at night. And I'm just so encouraged by everyone's sharing today about teachers. Like Chris, what you said was just really inspiring, and Bo had his jersey, and then, you know, Deb feeling so strongly about that teacher, and Teresa talking about my school, and Sherry Blunt, who we just cherish. She is a true hero in all of this. So I'm very happy to hear, Teresa, that you have had a great experience. Hopefully I will get to know your daughter. I don't know her, but a teacher who had a huge, powerful presence in my life. Wasn't until I was 30 and I went back to college. I was most of my life an academic fail, really. Academics was not a real priority in my family, and so we didn't really know how to do it, and so I just kind of floundered a little bit. I had some emotional problems in high school, and I went back to Front Range just wanting to finish. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I just want to finish. And I had a biology teacher, Chris Romero at Front Range in Fort Collins, who was like, I think you should be in the Future Teachers of America Club. And I was like, what? What's that? And he goes, and I was getting A's in his class. I never got A's ever in my life. And he said, I think you should consider being a science teacher, and meanwhile, you're going to be my lab TA. And I was like, what the hell? That's for smart people, you know? So he picked me to do that, and it just has meant so much to me. After that, it just set me off on a pretty positive trajectory through the rest of my academic experience. So I'm really grateful for him.
Mila.
Good morning. I'm Mila Shepard, Chief of Human Resources. I'm doing well today. No issues or elephants. Expect to get through our agenda, but I always expect to get through our agenda. I'm an optimist. This glass is half full. I had a long time to sit and reflect and think about teachers and listen to your amazing stories, and you could name a dozen, right? I think the one I'll pick was a turning point for me. In my senior year, I had an English teacher at Arvada West High School named John Donaldson. And Mr. Donaldson, in our senior end of year awards ceremonies, kind of checking out conference, said to me, I hear you're going to School of Mines and you're going to study engineering. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm signed up for. And he says, I don't know why you're doing that. You are someone who likes people, and you're so great at writing and the humanities and all of this stuff. Why are you going to an engineering school? And he really made me stop and just question my whole assumption. And within about a month, I had also enrolled at CU Boulder just in case. And by August, I did not go to Mines. I went to Boulder and got a degree in math and in teaching, and the rest is history. Clearly, I do like people better than numbers and the engineering, and that was just this huge right-hand turn that I never would have seen, but for somebody outside of myself pointing out the obvious to him. So I value that insight.
Matt.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Schmidt. I'm the principal at Pathways. I'm doing well this morning. No issues or elephants, ready to rock and roll. I share definitely the expectations of the group to keep plowing through the stuff we need to get done. I want to give a couple teacher shout outs. First one I want to give out is on my learning curve. That's Bill Lampier. He was actually a professor of mine at CSU. I was in kind of the later stages of the teacher ed program. I'd already finished up my biology and math degrees, and was getting into the teaching game, but frankly, pretty uninspired. Even though I was getting close to student teaching, I was just not feeling it. I was like, this maybe isn't for me. And Bill was a professor, but he was also the principal at Centennial High School in Fort Collins, which is an alternative high school. And Bill came into this small teaching methods class that he co-taught with a CSU professor, and he came in and he said, relationships, relationships, relationships. And he said it again. And he went on to this whole piece about what it's all about. I was like, now I'm feeling this guy. I feel what he's saying. And so Bill, man, he inspired the heck out of me. He is absolutely why I ended up sticking through teaching and getting into the whole teaching profession and getting onto my Long's piece. And it's funny, I think back, I've been watching the Michael Jordan thing, and everybody used to say, I want to be like Mike. And I used to kind of be like, I think I want to be like Bill. And you know, here I am, gray beard and all, and running an alternative high school. And so Bill's my guy. He was super inspirational about what it's all about in education, in my opinion. So I'll give a shout out to Bill, and then I want to give a shout out to one of my current teachers. That's Tara Vigil. She is one of my learning specialists. What a rock star. I mean, to be a learning specialist in a school with your most challenging students in the district, she has the patience of a saint, both with the kids and with all of the crazy adults in my building as well. And so Tara is just an anchor, and love having her on board. So I want to give a shout out to one of my peeps as well.
And now Kathy. Sorry, Kathy.
Oh, finally. No. This is really fun. I think that's probably one of my favorite opening questions. I could talk forever. I have 3 kids who've gone through Adams 12. We've had like 60 teachers. I could spend hours. I won't. I'm going to go back to, because so lucky. And anyway, I could cry for that. I'm going to talk about my teacher, Mr. Frank Rosengren. I had him for a class I ended up in by accident that year on social studies. And we didn't call it critical thinking back then, but I would say he's my first person who got me really questioning kind of ways that I thought. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, very monochromatic in beliefs and many other ways back then, still is a little bit, but, and he just talked about, you know, things we talk about now, like what's a good source and where did you get your information and how are you supporting your ideas? And he started a model UN program. So, and took a bunch of us to New York City, and we were Zimbabwe, and we stayed at the downtown New York Y. That was a opening experience. I imagine you couldn't do that now, but he was just great. And then my other 2, I won't tell the whole story, are 2 English teachers, Mrs. Irene Novak and Pamela Sellers. And you talk about people who love their craft. They just got so excited about literature, and Mrs. Sellers was hilarious. Like she thought, she's like, what you need to know about literature? And she had crazy hair that she could never comb right. And so of course we were probably mean to her. I don't remember, but we thought she was great. She said, if there's social pauses, you need to know Chaucer. Bring up Chaucer. I'm like, we're all high schoolers rolling our eyes like, yeah, we're gonna bring up Chaucer at our parties. But one day, I'll date myself. So Pink Floyd, The Wall was the big album. And one of our classmates saw the video and shaved off his eyebrows. And so he'd been in the week, and finally she looks at me, she goes, Jim, I cannot look at you anymore. And she took part of her hair, she cut it off, she put tape on it, and she put it on his eyes. And it was hilarious. So, you know, just shout out to all those teachers who live and breathe their topic. And, you know, so that's just a fun memory, and we'll never forget many teachers.
Jim.
I'm Jim. I'm one of your facilitators. I'm doing well. I don't have any issues or elephants. Expectations are that we will make it through the agenda, as aggressive as it is. There are things that we have to get done today. The question today, I would hope every one of our parents and students would struggle with identifying their favorite teacher. My favorite teacher has changed and grown. That list is growing. But every one of them recognized me as an individual. They recognized my strengths and helped me build upon them, and taught me how to deal with some weaknesses that I have. I suppose one I'd shout out today would be, at that time it was Captain, it's now Colonel retired, Lewis Jeffries, helped recognize me as an individual, myself as an individual with strengths, and how to deal with them, how to grow from them, and how to move to the next steps.
And I'm Dave, one of your facilitators. I'm doing really good this morning. I have no issues or elephants. My expectations, I'm going to echo what Chris and Colleen said about staying in the process. I think that's something that I'd really like to have you focus on today. We kind of, at the end of the last meeting, got a little positional in some things. And so one of the things that I've talked to people about is when somebody said, you know, we need to have a discussion on this. What they're really saying is we need to debate this. So Jim and I are going to try to keep you in the process today, and you've got a healthy agenda here, and I think we can get through most of it. But that's my expectations. And the teacher I want to recognize, I absolutely hated this woman. She was a seventh grade reading interventionist, and that's not what they called them back in my day. But she pulled me in one day and said, you can't read, can you? And I said, well, of course I can read. I'm a seventh grader. So she handed me a newspaper and she said, I want you to read the front page of the newspaper here. And I struggled mightily. And so her and my mother, in all their infinite wisdom, put me in a remedial reading class between my 7th and 8th grade year that was brutal. I was so frustrated and so on and so forth. But what it did teach me to do was to not only read, but retain what I was reading. So I appreciate Mrs. Hickey a lot. I grew up in rural Montana, and because of her, I struggled to make C's all the way up through 7th grade. And in 8th grade, I improved a little more, and I was able to get B's and C's. And by the time I graduated, I was an AB student through that. But it just, I really appreciate her. She passed away several years ago. Her son was my best friend and guitarist in a band that I played in. And we practiced in her living room for many years with our band, and she loved hearing our band. And then afterwards, she'd sit and talk to me. The only thing, the biggest thing I hated about her though is she was a chain smoker. So when she asked me if I could read, it was, "You can't read, can you?" And so it was that type of thing. And I was scared to death of the woman, but I appreciate her. The other thing I want to say is I appreciate all of you. You guys' passion is just amazing, and it's what I love working with you guys. All of you come at even this process as teachers and as people that really care for their students, care for the constituents that you answer to, and so I appreciate every single one of you guys. So Mila, I'm going to throw it back to you, and you and Dave can tell us where we want to start and what we need to do.
So we want to start with the extended negotiation, beg your pardon, some contract date realignment language. And there is a document in your IBS shared drive. And Dave, I just want to, it is an aggressive agenda. And I do want, my best hope is we can get through the 3 items and then leave a good chunk of time to visit elementary planning time. But I just want to throw out a proposal that if we find ourselves entering into the 11 o'clock hour and we haven't finished the other 3, I would propose that we save ourselves some time to just at least touch on that really burning topic before the end of today. So is that all right with you? I realize I'm just springing that on you in the middle of this meeting, but hi.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to have something put into the air today before moving off to try to address it on a different day. So that's fine with me.
Okay.
So with that, you say, Mila, is at 11 o'clock if we're not to that, to go back to elementary planning time?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we'll do then.
So if you are in your IBS shared drive, if you can find the document that says contract realignment language draft. I see many of you are in there. Let me give you a minute to get there. So in terms of process, Jim and Dave, I think as Dave and I talked about this, we didn't necessarily think it would fit in sort of the traditional story and interest, and it was a concept we introduced last session. I think maybe we could start with any clarifying questions, and then I could walk people through what's on this document, if that sounds like a good approach.
We'll try that, and like we always say, that if we get in trouble, we can always go back to the process. So if you have clarifying questions on this, put your hand up in the participants box. Dave?
So a question did come up from somebody that is addressed in the document, Mila, but I thought if you could just walk us through. Currently, we have the coaching and other stipend payments in Appendix C spread out over the 10 months. In this recommendation, you have it split up over 9 months. Could you talk through that, the rationale and whatnot?
You bet. Okay, so let me just take you through the document. What you have is every article that has some mention of the contract start date or the payment schedule that Dave was referring to. So at the top of the document, you see Article 30, which talks about the effective dates of the salary. And so in all of these articles, we're just simply proposing or suggesting that the change in order to realign would be a change from September 1 to August 1. So you see the strike through and you see the capitalization, which indicates the proposed language. So Article 30 would just have a couple of changes of date from September 1 to August 1. And then when we go to Article 31, which is the effective dates of the agreement, similarly, the only changes that would be necessary would be to mark that the contract year ends on July 31st, that the contract year begins on August 1st. And so you'll see strike throughs of old language and then uppercase proposed new language. Similarly, Article 27 in Section 7 does have a mention of the start of the year. So we just replace September with August. Article 6, also, which is the dues deduction article, also had a mention of the start date. And then you see the italicized language, and this is my recommendation to you from the HR team. So we have 3 appendices that deal with the distribution of coaching and co-curricular salary stipends. And right now they're distributed over 10 months. We ask administrators to have all of those stipend recipients identified by no later than October so that we can have a November distribution. With the start of the year and teachers figuring out what they want to take on as extra clubs, duties, co-curricular coaching, the hiring process, if you have to replace a coach or a person, tends to take a little time. And so the month of August generally is consumed with just getting started with the academic year. September is very often the time when some of these coaching positions are selected. And so we don't see it as particularly feasible to identify ask administrators to identify who their coaches are and ask teachers to commit to those sorts of things until the year is sort of underway. And so we get all of that locked down and get that implemented for the November paycheck. And so that would just, we would recommend that we keep the same amounts, distribute them in 9 equal installments rather than 10. And so with that recommendation, subsequently, you see what the following recommendations would be in Appendix A, B, and C. It's just replacing the 10 months with 9 months. And then the last section is just titled Further Considerations for Initial Implementation. I don't believe that this needs to be contract language. These are just some things that we need to be very clear about as we do this the first time. And so we've got like 3 kinds of employees as we roll from one contract year into the next contract year. We have employees who declare their intention to leave the district and terminate their employment relationship with us. And many of those do so early. And so the first bullet there refers to employees who terminate before the June payroll cutoff is June 12th. And so that's why the 12th is highlighted as a date there. If you're an employee who's going to leave us and you tell us before the June payroll cutoff, my proposal would be, my recommendation from HR would be that we continue to pay those people their normal June paycheck, their normal July paycheck, and their normal August paycheck, which allows their benefits to continue all the way through August. People who are planning to leave us, aren't expecting that their benefits or pay would end early. And so I would propose that if we know about your departure, we would keep you on the traditional track. The second bullet identifies people who choose to leave us after that June payroll cutoff. And if you're with us working, we would plan in this set of events to pay you 2 paychecks in June. And if you don't tell us you're leaving until after the June paycheck, you're going to get those 2 paychecks in June. There's no way to reverse that. So then that would mean that you would have gotten your check number 10 and your check number 11 for the 12-month year in June. You'll get your check number 12 in July. And then that would be it. You'd get your final check, your benefits would end in July, and that would be the end of your contract. So for the very few people who depart from employment after June 12th, they would end their benefits in July. We can only offer and extend benefits. Our insurance, medical benefits contracts require that we extend benefits really only to people who are actively employed. If they're not actively employed, then they can go on to COBRA. And that's a law that indicates that you can be covered through a different method to our COBRA provider for up to 18 months. And so if that presented a real hardship for someone, they could enlist in COBRA, enroll rather in COBRA for up to 18 months after leaving us. The third category of employees are those that are continuing. And those who continue to work under this plan would see no interruption in their benefits coverage. They would see no interruption in pay. They would get checks number 10 and 11 in June. They'd get check number 12 in July. And then they would get check number 1 of a new year in August. No interruption. So, and I just think those are the practical use rules that we all need to know about and understand. But like I said, I don't think those need to be committed to language. So let me see what questions there are.
Okay, Mila, we have 2 on the list, starting with Colleen.
I don't know if I have a question. I just have some history for you. When we bargained the teacher directed release days, we on purpose started them in September to give principals August to get their buildings started and running with the things that they needed to do. I know a lot of principals choose to give them a teacher directed in August, but we started it in September on purpose.
Laura Leppy.
So the paycheck being the 13th or the August paycheck, that would, is that something that would be just for this year, or is that something that could be an option for folks in the future? Is there like a payroll kind of option for them if someone were non-renewed or someone were switching districts or whatever, or is that just a 2020 kind of extra?
Laura, I think if I understand your question correctly, this would be a one-time sort of getting realigned process. And then from moving on forward, everyone who starts gets a paycheck in August and they get benefits in August. And there's no more, you remember your first year when you had 13 paychecks and you got only 1/13 of your pay each of those paychecks instead of 1/12 of your pay, that would be eliminated. So this is just a one-time transition. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because I think that mine actually started in like September for a lot of districts because you didn't get your paycheck till after you had worked or whatever. So it started the 12 months in September kind of thing. I was just curious about people leaving our district if they switched to a district. I know you guys have said that a lot of districts have moved to this July or August 1st to July thing, but just in case someone moved to a district that didn't start their contract in August, if there were going to be a gap in like medical coverage or something weird like that, but they knew they were leaving in, March because they'd been non-renewed, but then they got a job and they knew there'd be that gap if there was an option for them to do anything about that.
Oh, their option is to enroll in COBRA to cover themselves with their benefits for that 1 month gap. That always exists, but not through the district. You have to be actively employed and receiving a paycheck to be on our benefits rolls.
Okay, and then the information that is in that 3 bullets, would we just like send that out to folks so that they knew that that was coming, so that it wasn't contract language?
Yeah, I would work with Dave to figure out what we thought was best, but I think those would just serve as our talking points and our basic understandings about how this would be implemented.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So Colleen, back
Go
to
ahead.
your comment or your history. So that's article, that's the article 27, the
27
duties. And
Yeah.
so are you suggesting that to be in alignment with sort of past practice and intentionality that we would leave that as September rather than amending it to August?
I think it's up to the group what you want to do. I'm just giving you history that we knew principals used August and needed August for those new teacher meetings and getting people up to date on what the district wanted us to do. And so we on purpose started it September 1st so that they would have August up. Just history, whatever you guys want to do, I'm okay with.
Sorry.
Dorman.
I think it would be very important to start those teacher early release days in September. That time is necessary for our administration to give us the training that we need for the upcoming year, the new initiatives. We really appreciate that time, and we wouldn't want to miss out on that time. So,
Laura Leppy.
I think that there was always that confusion, and I just learned that August was supposed to be all administratively directed ERDs because folks always had that like, wait, it's the 4th. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. I love having that teacher directed in August, but I also do understand that there's a lot that has to go on. I love it because I always feel like my classroom's not quite ready and I need some time, and like my preps aren't sort of going where I need them to be quite yet, but I am also okay with whatever it's supposed to be and the intention and the rules. But I will say that at my school, we have very lovingly been gifted that time on the 4th Wednesday in August. So I would love it if it's at August, but I also understand if it needs to be September.
Dorman, your hand's still up. Did you have more? Okay.
The one thing that I think we missed, Mila, was that we would strike the section that refers to dividing the paycheck for new employees over the 13 months instead of the 12 months. I know that wasn't a change piece. It's just left off the document that by making this change, we would no longer need that language, and that would just be, that section would be struck.
Anybody else have questions for Mila or Dave? Chris.
So not a question, just some more information. Last time we went through this memo that Susie had shared with us, and there was this worst case risk element that she talked about in terms of cash flow, that given some of the delays that law has permitted around making property tax payments, the worst case was that come September, we might be $8 million short in terms of having cash on hand and would have to sell some investments at a loss to be able to pay all of our bills. The good news is that we received a $19 million plus property tax payment from Adams County this week. So we no longer believe that worst case has any risk to us. And so I just think that's another positive thing for us in evaluating this.
Other discussion on this? Questions for Dave or Mila?
If you take a look, I've just pasted the article that Dave was referring to. It is section 9 of Appendix A. So if you go down to the Appendix A section, you'll see it's titled Payday. And so I would suggest that we will just I don't know. I don't know if we even need that section at all.
So let me ask a question. Dave, is there a need for a little bit of team time to talk about this with your groups, just to make sure that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted and so on and so forth?
I mean, we can do that if folks want to go that direction. It's up to the will of the group. But I mean, at the moment, I don't have anything popping up that is the only, like I said, the 13-month paycheck wasn't a change. It would just, because we're moving the contract, that part would just become moot because we're no longer needing to do that practice because the contract year and school year would be in alignment once again.
Okay.
I suppose the most minimal change we could make is just to do the correction that I just typed in to change 13 to 12. It just declares it's really superfluous language. It's not strictly necessary. It is the practice. And so I question whether we need this article at all, but at a minimum, we could just state that newly hired teachers who've attended orientation and have paperwork complete by July 30th. There is some value in saying if your paperwork's not complete, you're not going to get paid starting in August. So, you know, we can let this article stand as a new teacher treatment. Paperwork has to be done, and then you'll get paid in 12 installments beginning on August to the following July.
Okay, any other discussion, any other questions on this? Linda.
So Mila, if I'm not hired until August 7th, I'm a late hire, I'm not going to get paid until September. Did I understand that correctly?
Actually, as long as we are able to process all of your paperwork before the August payroll cutoff, which is generally right around August 14th, 15th of the month, we can get you in for an August paycheck.
Okay. Thank you.
We need your paperwork typically by the 30th to get all the processes run all the way through to payroll for those new hires. But that's why that 30th is there. But we push it to make sure people get a paycheck if we've got them in at all.
Would it make sense then to change it instead of July 30th to state the August payroll cutoff date?
Yeah, I'd want to reach out to my payroll and my HR team to just be sure that's really feasible. If you were comfortable with me putting in the date that's most flexible or most generous but doable, I would be happy to go check that.
Okay.
So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm having trouble reading your group a little bit today, and Jim, maybe you can read them better than I do. And it could be that it's virtual and I can't see the body language like I normally do. I hesitate a little bit to take a temperature check, but Dave, Mila, guide me on where you want Jim and I to go with this.
So I have a suggestion. Let's let Mila check her team for that date, verify that date, time. We can move on to the next item for discussion and kind of do that a couple of times. And then if at that point people want to discuss more or go into team time, and then we can come back. Does that make sense, Dave? Give people some time to percolate on it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. That'll work fine. So so think about the changes in this, and if there's any other questions, any concerns that you have with this, and we'll come back to this after we do the next section of the agenda. Is everybody okay with that?
So I'm wondering about waiting till we finish the SPED letter draft language review, because the same thing may come up in the next two items. Putting them all together for see if that question exists. Do we need some group time? What do we need to do?
My recommendation was to walk through these, a couple of these items, and then give the time. So not immediately following that.
And then possibly thumbs up all of them at the same time. Is that, or just go one to the next to the next? Is that what you're thinking, Dave?
Yeah, we can decide if we need team time at that point or more discussion. And then if we don't, then walk one at a time through an approval process.
Okay, so I'm going to let you guys control that agenda. When you get the feeling that you want temperature check or whatever, please let us know. So let's move to the next one. Mila?
Okay, so in your IBS team drive, you'll see a document called Draft Language Extended Negotiations. Dave, do you want to talk people through this one?
Sure. So as we have been discussing with the legislator, having not even presented or even tried to talk about their budget yet, and the unfeasibility of being able to really start talking compensation and all the other things that go along with that. And the kind of desire that we've talked about to get some of these things like the rolling of the contract up a month. We just can't finish the negotiations process before our MOA on IBS dictates that we complete, which would be next Friday, the process. Even if we were to fall back to, which it says in the draft to Article 4, we'd have to do a little bit of restart, and we would still be limited by a relatively early June date that may not be practical in this environment to get all the things done in the compensation space or budget related items. And so Mila and I recommended that we add a bullet item to the IBS MOA for approval of this group and for ratification. You can see that at the bottom of that list there. We've updated the dates to reflect next year, the 2021 school year, but then have in the bullet item there, due to the delay in the state budgeting process in the 2020 legislative session, the district and the association agreed to temporarily extend the time period for negotiations in order to discuss compensation issues during May and June 2020, and to meet the Board of Education's legal obligation to approve the balanced budget by June 30th. This is a one-time extension valid only for May and June 2020. So conceptually, what would happen is that we would discuss these items continuing pretty much as soon as we finish up with these conversations and start walking through the state budget, what the implication is for Adams 12, what that means for our folks, and kind of just walking through what we need to discuss in that space. So that's our kind of recommendation. Instead of writing a whole separate article or piece, we thought adding it to the appropriate place was to add it to the since MOAs are temporary anyways, put that as a bulleted item and then strike it the following year in the ratification process and review process.
Questions for Dave on this one? Give you a few seconds to get through it. And so, Dave, are you wanting me to ask for thumbs if you have no question, if people have no questions on this?
I think it would be okay to walk through the next couple and let people think about it. I mean, we're doing well on time, and then I think it would be a good idea at that point maybe to just give a moment or two for, you know, a quick 15-minute caucus, just to just make sure everyone's good, and then come back and then walk through the vote, or bring up any other concerns or questions in that space.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Dave. Chris.
So I guess the question I have, there's been some discussion about the possibility of a ratification vote on whatever work we get done here in this session and the next, and then another ratification vote potentially happening in June after that set of work is done. Is there any language that needs to be changed elsewhere in the agreement to have two different ratification processes for the same kind of cumulative bargaining year?
So the short answer is no, because we have the ability to go out for ratification, legally speaking. I mean, practice is a little bit tougher. You know, we truly have tried not to do this. We've had some late stuff, but anyways, anytime the negotiations team and the district reach an agreement, it is appropriate for us to go out for ratification. And then the other piece I would say is, you know, we have that clause around, you know, whenever law changes or there are fiscal problems, we are compelled to negotiate and then put something back to the board and for members for agreement. So I would say that definitely, we are definitely in that space that we would be compelled to walk through that process one way or another. This just allows us to, like I said, do the stuff for June for the rolling of the contract, and allows us to just be very transparent about what we're doing in this space.
And I guess the other question is, are there any things about the ratification process that you feel like we might need to visit about, look at, change potentially to deal with a June ratification, given that teachers will be away from school at that time?
So my intention is to, as part of the document that goes out for ratification, similar to Mila's adding of just the clarifiers for what happens with the rolling of the contract date, with the insurance cutoffs and that kind of stuff, is to give notice for a June ratification vote to people's work email by no later than, the date has yet to be determined, but no later than X date. They would receive notice in their work email, which would suffice for the legal notification for offline, off-cycle notification of giving ample legal notice for people to look in their email for the ballot, for lack of a better phrase. I'm struggling to capture the right legal words, but.
Other questions? Any other questions? Chris, your hand's still up, so go ahead, Dave, sorry.
The only thing I would add is that between this COVID experience has pushed my legal and technological capacities to its full extremes to work through some of this stuff.
I can relate to that, Dave. All right, so I see no other questions, so move on to the next one.
So I believe the next item that we're going to discuss is going to be in the team folder as well, labeled 26 point, oh my gosh, my brain just skipped, 26.6. Thank you. Yeah.
And it's class size, caseload, and it's a draft.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of that article. And
thank you for renaming that for me.
We're not going to talk class size or caseload.
No, that's just the title of the article.
Because that would swamp us. That's our second favorite time-sucking topic. But section 6 of that article has some current language. And so if you've opened that document, you see that the current language requires that by the end of the first week of each individual school year, the superintendent and his or her designee shall distribute to all teachers a letter delineating a process teachers may follow when they feel placement of a special education student is inappropriate. And we've got a change, a suggested proposed change to that language. And I guess it would be appropriate for us to tell a little bit of story about why this this language exists, how it came to be, and then why we feel like a change is appropriate at this time. So, oh, Colleen, who is that new member of our team?
That's my cat who this whole time has jumped into all my educational videos, who sits on my computer and types things for me, knocks my printer off the table. She like does not, she's the boss of me. I think she loves me, but I think she's the boss.
She's probably ready for you to go back to work and get out of her space, but
but it's coming to summer, so she has to put up with me a little while longer.
There you go.
She like loves me, lays on me, and then all of a sudden she's hissing at me because I moved. Don't move. You don't have my permission.
Sorry, I got distracted there, everybody. Kidding.
So my question for you on that, do you want Jim or I to record the story on this, or do you just want to tell the story on it?
I think at this point, telling, and then if people have heartburn and once again, we need to go into the process, then I think Mila and I can combine the story down into a few bullet points and then have people go from there.
Okay, sounds good, thanks. So Mila or Dave, who's telling the story on it? Mila?
Dave, do you want to start? Dave and Heather, I think, are going to talk quite a bit here about perhaps why this language exists, but Dave, you usually have the historical perspective on contract.
Yeah. So, you know, as we did research to figure out, you know, where this article came from after Heather brought up a concern that I'll let her speak to her concern. You know, what we figured out was that, you know, in an age, in a previous age, we'll just use those phrases right now, you know, there was a need for, as there are special education laws going into place and not going into place, and there needed to be a desire for teachers to be able to raise their hand and say this student's placement was incorrect, whether it was the placement before we had center-based programs, before we had anything else, that basically I can't meet the needs of this student in his or her current special education placement. And so in many ways, this acted as kind of a whistleblower style protection, but also a way for to hold the district accountable for publishing a process to make it of how I was to go about that, to make it clear and transparent in the time when you know, special education laws were really first taking shape and were first becoming you know, a reality across the nation and in our district. And so this article, this little section here, is kind of written in a response to many of those kind of desires. It's been modified slightly over time to with language and whatnot, but the genesis goes back to that era and some of the old contracts that we had to sort through, and just talking through and looking at the change documents associated with those contract items. Heather, do you want to take it from there and talk about the reason why it came to your attention and why you brought it up as an issue?
Sure. So this is a letter that has been sent out every fall to all staff in the district, and I've gotten it and read it, and you know, I was always a little uncomfortable with it because I felt like just singling out students with disabilities was discriminatory, and that we also had federal laws that we have to abide by that take people through this process of determining placement. So I was uncomfortable with the original letter, met with Mila and Priscilla last year, and we reworded it to align more with federal law. And I think that was a good first step. But in thinking about it and discussing with the smaller team, I think we landed on the fact that it was a discriminatory policy, and that we really wanted to extend it to problem solving for any student that you were having difficulty with. And so we had some conversation about involving our director of MTSS and kind of expanding the letter that we send out in the fall to, if you're having difficulty or need support with any student in your classroom. And that's, you know, we landed in a place of comfortability with that.
Colleen, did you have a question?
I think I just have a suggestion, or I guess it's a question. Could we change from their ability to meet, because that's kind of negative towards teachers? I think our teachers have lots of abilities to meet the needs of kids, to just saying, have concerns regarding meeting the needs of a student in their classroom, because sometimes it's not your ability, it's that you need a para, or that that kid needs a smaller class or something like that. So I think it's the same spirit. I just was suggesting.
Can you restate
Thanks
that question or the sentence, because I didn't quite capture the phrase that you put in.
So have concerns regarding meeting the needs of a student in their classroom.
Yeah, I mean, that meets this, but we were struggling to word that that sentence. So that doesn't, I don't, Mila or Deb or Heather, who were on the writing group, please chime in if you disagree. I think it meets my intent, or I think our intent of the writing of the language. And I see Mila typing it in, so I'm assuming that she agrees as well.
It's just more positive, I think, that, you know, we're seeking a solution, not that something's wrong with anybody in this situation.
I think that's great.
And Dave, thanks for calling on Colleen. I was hand capturing some of the story on there, so I appreciate that.
Yep.
Heather? Okay.
It looks like Allison has her hand up.
Yeah, she just put it up. Thanks,
I
Allison.
was just going to chime in and say that was like, I think it looks great. The only issue I had was what Colleen brought up. So I think that's great.
Very good. Any other questions, comments for Dave or Mila? Mila?
Group wordsmithing is painful, but let me just ask a question here. Is it, for my English friends, have concerns regarding meeting the needs? Does that flow okay? Is that all right? I'm questioning the word regarding.
How about with regards to meeting?
I said my 9th grade English teacher was my favorite teacher. I didn't say that he got me to master English.
So let me go ahead and just take out the ability to phrase. How do you like that?
I think it should say have concerns in regard to meeting the needs of a student in their classroom instead of with.
I think we found the most painful way to group wordsmith, which is is now also via Zoom. I think that makes it just that much better.
Chris, I have to ask you if you have the same dislike for Google Docs as our general counsel, Phil Spare, who absolutely gets twitchy when in the middle of a Google Doc.
Yeah, I'm terrible at all this technology stuff. I definitely need a lot of remedial help. It doesn't matter the format. I'm bad in all of them.
I don't think it's not the technology. It's the everybody with their fingers in the pie. That makes
I can see why that makes an attorney nervous.
Yeah.
He loves the chat box too for board meetings. Don't use it. It's like, oh, don't worry.
Anything else on this one, folks? Dave, let me know when you're ready to move on.
Nothing else. I'm ready to move on to the next section.
So next section.
Could I take us back? Could I take us back to 26.6 for a moment?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have really good. Oh, this that was 26.6. Contract realignment. Beg your pardon.
Okay.
I have great FONA friends over in the payroll and compensation teams. And they've gotten back to me with, so one of the casualties of our remote operation is an in-person orientation. We're switching to a remote orientation, but we think that rather than call out this mandatory attendance at orientation as part of your prerequisite to start getting a check, we'd like to strike that if that was acceptable. So in the Appendix A, paragraph 9 that we've been talking about, you see a strikeout of who have attended orientation. So it just reads newly hired teachers whose new employee paperwork is completed by August 15th, that's the payroll cutoff, of the year in which they are hired, shall be paid in 12 installments on the last business day of each month. Everything else the same.
Okay.
That'd answer Linda's question on that as well, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Allison, you have your hand up, Allison?
Yeah, it just says newly hired teachers to the district, newly hired teachers.
That's come a copy and paste from the, there's the title and then that text goes underneath that in the actual contract. So it's the title language, then the yeah, then the sentence starts.
Really more correctly
There we go.
formats like that.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on that one? Okay, where are we going next, Dave?
So Miles is going to chat with us, I believe, about specials, elementary specials, the MOA and the allocations. Mila, do you want to run us through that one?
Yeah, could we take a quick break and let me get some materials shared with you guys at maybe like a 10-minute break and then come back?
That works for me. And Mila, would you email that to me since I can't get to it when you get a chance?
I need to email it to everybody. So.
Okay, sounds great. All right, so 10 minutes, come back at 9:36, folks.
Jody, will you put us on a break or whatever that looks like?
Okay, I'll just share a screen.
Thank
and then
you.
when you guys get back, I'll drop it.
Thank you.
So Dave and Jim, whoa. Dave and Jim, are you there?
I am.
I am too.
I think since we're going on a 10-minute break, I'm gonna head over to school because we have to they take our temperature and they have to ask us these questions and stuff before we go in. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and go, and and Jody, I'll come back in the meeting right around 10. Is that okay?
Yep. You'll be in the waiting room, but I'll let you back in.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Sandy.
Jim and Dave, just in case, so if you're curious, they're redoing the roof in my building. And so if you see me turn around really suddenly, it's because it sounds like he's coming through the wall and it's terrifying. But I just went out and checked on him. The guy's doing wonderful, but he's like, I mean, it's like legit banging right on this wall and it's freaking me out. So I apologize if you see me like panic.
No problem, Laura. You do what you need to do.
And Laura, are you still needing to go to school today? Is that correct?
That's not me. I think that was Sandy.
Sandy, yeah, and Dave,
Sandy, sorry, yeah.
Sandy, she is out right now. She said she'd be back about 10 o'clock. So
they just my room's already apparently in pieces. So
sweet. Sweet. Sorry, I got my folks mixed up. That was last week that you were cleaning up your room. I can't.
Yeah. It was like this panic sort of, you have 2 days, get out. We want to start destroying tearing up the building because they're redoing all of the cabinets and the plumbing, and I'm sure it looks terrific.
Yes. Okay. Perfect.
Mila, were you able to get a little break in there as well?
Super fast. Yeah.
All right. Very
I'm
good. Good.
Mila, I just saw your invite for the budget thing. We're delivering 8th grade like letters and stuff that morning, so I won't be able to attend. So I'll just tell you that right now. I'm sorry. I would normally, but
I'm sure that your teammates will share the doom and gloom with you.
Can't wait. Looking forward to it.
Well, we're getting closer to getting people to get back in.
So Mila, the document we'll need in this next one.
Yeah, it's in the elementary specials folder inside of the IBS drive. And it is called, well, let me go there. I think it's called Specials Staffing Committee Recommendations 2020.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, did you say it's just loose in there or is it in the specials folder?
It's in the specials folder.
Okay.
Okay. Jody, I think we've been live all this time. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so.
And we have everybody back, Mila, so if you're ready to start, go ahead.
Okay, so I will just share with you, refresh your memory on the MOA titled Special Staffing. And if you've got a copy of your master agreement and you want to look at it, you're welcome to. But I'll just remind you that the charge to that committee during the 1920 school year were 4 things, 4 bullets. Monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the non-discretionary school-based budget elementary special staff formula. To recommend what the ideal schedule would be to effectively deliver art, music, PE to full-day kindergartners. To examine the impact, cost, and feasibility of adding a 4th specials round in the area of technology. And to consider the impact of full-day kindergarten on the staffing allocation formula. So what you see then in the document that I was referring to in our folder, Special Staffing Committee Recommendations, is largely our response to the first bullet item, the monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of the formula. So we looked at elementary schools, we looked at their schedules, we looked at, this was the first year of implementing this formula. We also had some competing interests, ELL Essentials, or the Department of Justice ELL mandates around how classes should be structured. There were other competing scheduling interests, like the needs of kids, as how do you schedule the special education services that are required. So it was really quite a jigsaw puzzle for elementary principals to put those mandates into place and then to layer in on top our allocation formula and scheduling requirements. So they did it, and with varying degrees of success. And so the team, Dave helped us do a lot of research on what are the schedules showing, how many schools are able to meet, the requirements, and upon studying the schools that were really unable to meet the requirements, we determined a few aspects of the allocation formula that just made it problematic. We tried to tease out what were some of those other conflicting demands and in another year could be accounted for and overcome. And then what we landed on in our recommendations really was, this is where the formula is not quite supporting what needs to happen. And so I just say all of that to give you like the context and the background for why we're recommending what we're recommending. Dave, do you want to add anything to like sort of the backstory of how we got to the recommendations?
So in the specials folder, you'll see a current schedules folder there as well that includes all of our research and analysis of all of the special schedules across the system. I may have missed one or two when I was porting them in because we had our own specials team folder for that committee. And so I believe I've gotten all of them ported over into that folder. If you really want to hurt your brain for a while and look at the different ones, if you were so inclined, the file that in that folder that I would point your attention to, because it's the document that we used to actually like do our work, is the one labeled Elementary Special Schedules Analysis, because it goes through the entire all the buildings in the district, whether they're meeting the current contractual obligations or agreements that we've made, and an analysis specifically of those that were not, to Mila's point, whether it was something that could be overcome as moot because of changes in allocations for next year based on recommendations, that kind of stuff, moving or current, what their course loads are going to look like next year as far as the number of courses that they have. And so all of that is in that document for your viewing pleasure if you really need something else to stare at for a while. But that gives just the context. We could give story, but then I'd give 30 stories, and that document encapsulates all of those individual stories. I learned a whole lot about how to design elementary schedules and how to read them through the purpose of this event investigation. So that was my professional development for the year.
Darren also served on that committee. Thank you, Darren, along with his colleague, Tim Griffin. Do you have anything you want to add about sort of the process we went through or where we landed with these recommendations?
Yeah, basically what Dave was saying, we talked to every single principal in our district and talked about, the big schools down to the smaller schools and the needs of 45-minute periods up to 50-minute periods, and then trying to rotate them all through there. And especially the new, with the all-day kinder has really added a lot to the plate of specials. And so we just thought for them to truly meet the needs of all of our students, we just had to increase the ability to get some that fourth round, or at least more time with art, music, and PE versus the 0.8 going up to the 1.0, which is just such a huge change for a master schedule. But yeah, it was thoroughly looked through. And Dave, you're right, not all the schedules are in there, but we do have them all. That just with the transfer, probably some didn't get in there.
Yeah, if I didn't have rights to, I could view, if I didn't have rights to copy the documents, because some of them were shared with us and weren't original documents in that folder. So I couldn't necessarily get all of them because I didn't have, I had access to view, but not manipulate those schedules. But if you had a question about an individual ones, we can definitely get you that copy. But that analysis comes from all of those different schedules. I would also just, to Darren's point, along with Tim, who was on our committee, we had representatives from who are the elementary content leads for art, music, and PE. So the district coordinators, along with Megan Kane, who serves as the district point person for specials.
Yeah, and Jennifer, Rose, and Matt have served on this committee for a couple of years now and have done really nice work with just thinking critically about, you know, what's solvable in some other manner, what needs to be solved through allocation and through this formula. So it's a good team. And so what you see in the document that's titled Special Staff Recommendations is new cut points. And you also see old cut points replicated there. So there are two tables, and just for those of you who'd like to look at the original and then see what the new recommendation is, I'll tell you that the recommendation was to drop the 1.0, you know, from 18 sections or 18 rounds down to 17. That seemed to be a real tension point in the ability to meet the needs of 45-minute class periods for schools. When they had 18 rounds and they were given 1.0, when I say 1.0, I'm talking, you know, one art teacher, one music teacher, one PE teacher. When they could have a full-time teacher, that was great. 17 rounds isn't really all that different in terms of creating a master schedule. And schools who had 17 and who traditionally or in the past have only been allocated a 0.8 teacher, a 4-day-a-week teacher, really struggled to meet all the competing interests. So the committee recommended that we drop that. We saw sort of a good differentiation. 16-round schools really can get by with a 4-day-a-week teacher, but those 17-round schools were, they struggled consistently. So that was one recommendation. The other recommendation was when you're a large school and you get not only your full-time art, music, and PE teachers, but you get an additional, and we'd like a tech teacher. We had a cut point that gave you a 0.5, and then it jumped to a full-time, a 1.0 tech teacher. And there just was a feeling that that's a huge jump in amount of staffing. And we created an intermediate zone. So greater than 24 rounds, you'll get a 4th full-time tech teacher. But if you're in the 22.5 to 23.5 number of rounds, you'll get a 4-day-a-week tech teacher. So that's a new interval that didn't exist. And then if you're in the 21 or 22 round range, you'll get a half-time tech teacher. And we felt like that would smooth out some of the implementation difficulties that we observed as well for larger schools. So and there were reasons for that, and they're listed below. We looked, as you've heard us say, we looked at schedules. We saw that either because of the DOJ ELL blocks of time or the lengthened math and literacy blocks of time, those were the real sticking points. And so the cost to implement, I'm going to just change this on this document real quickly. It's 2.6. So let me talk about the costs a little bit. We have, many of you know that we have veteran teachers who are backfilled. They're promised a 1.0 employment because of their the time they were hired in the district and an agreement made with them. So I think many of you are familiar with this term called backfill. And so these adjusted and more generous allocations add up to 3.6 more total FTE. However, because of the numbers of backfilled positions, specifically at Rocky Mountain, at Leroy, and at Hunter's Glen, that we were going to pay for those people anyway. So that takes the total cost of this increased allocation formula down to 2.6 total FTE. I'll tell you the beneficiaries of this. there, I don't know if, Dave, I don't know, what do you think? Should we go by name or just numbers of elementary schools? Or I don't think it hurts maybe to talk about the names of the schools, but.
I don't think that it matters to say, I mean,
yeah,
I think it's fine to say the names of the schools because it's a matter of, it's a matter of fact.
Yeah. So based on the numbers of sections, Westview was one of those 17 round schools that would jump to from 2.4 total FTE allocated. So that's a 0.8 each to 3.0. Mountain View is a large school. They would jump from a 3.5 allocation up to a 3.8. Leroy Drive from a 2.4 to a 3. So they're one of those 17 round schools, as is Hunters Glen. Cotton Creek is a large school. They would jump from a 3.5 up to a 3.8. Coyote Ridge. No, Coronado Hills. I wrote CH, sorry. Coronado Hills. Large school jumping from 3.5 to 3.8. I just want to double check my spreadsheet here on that. Yeah, Coronado Hills. And Cherry Drive, the committee recommended that Cherry Drive, they're very small and they've had a 0.5 allocation in the past. We did not address the 0.5 allocation as a committee work, but we did recommend to the Enrollment Reserve Committee that Cherry Drive move out of this 0.5. It's not sustainable to have a half-time teacher at a school. We were trying originally to pair Cherry Drive and Riverdale as two very small schools and employ people full-time and have each one half-time. That was part of a pilot a couple years ago. Last year's recommendation, you may recall, was to phase out that pilot. And this year, Cherry Drive is the only school in our system that's small enough to have potentially a half-time allocation, and it is just not workable. And so through Enrollment Reserve, we recommended that they be bumped up to the 4-day a week, the 2.4 number of FTE. So that's not really part of a more generous allocation formula. I just want you to be aware that that's a recommendation that was made through the Enrollment Reserve process and would come on. We would recommend that that be officially looked at in the allocation formula for next year, whether or not we have half-time allocations at all.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Please.
And one of the reasons why we didn't adjust that in this particular and made the recommendation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what the allocation they got was the 0.8 for their building-based budget, was just that we didn't have any data with a workable schedule at 0.5 that we could figure out a way to even declare that at this point you can do a 0.5. No matter how small Cherry Drive has gotten, a 0.5 allocation has not been able to be sustainable in their school and their schedule. And so we would like to continue to look at that formula as if our schools start to decrease, or if at any point there is actually a school that can operate on a 0.5 allocation. That's a question that we're still grappling with as a committee.
So I would remind everybody that this was on our agenda for March 13th. We would have been sharing these recommendations, and that would have jived quite nicely with the SBB school-based budgeting process. That would have allowed schools, principals, teachers to know what the allocation for the coming year was potentially going to be, allow them to start creating their master schedules, allow them to hire or renew people for the coming year. And so when we went on to our extended break and things came to a screeching halt for a while, we left these allocations that I've just described to you in the school-based budgets. And that's the part of the process that Dave and I referred to a couple of sessions ago as being out of order, really. But that's what's sitting, this recommendation, this set of recommendations is what's currently sitting in school-based budgets and what principals and teachers have been looking at and thinking about and planning on.
Okay, questions for Mila or Dave around the specials? I don't see any. Dave or Mila, are you ready to move on then? Okay. So where are we at? What's next?
So the other item that is not technically written on this agenda, but is implied, is just the other MOAs that we recommended. If you refer back to the document about the MOAs in the team folder, on the ones that we are recommending not be adjusted, and then we just update dates for this current year. Just as part of whatever our next process for approval, that would be part of that discussion of approving those MOAs that we recommended, unless someone had a question or a concern. If you want to take a second and just pull that document up for look at in the team drive. It was labeled MOA summary in the team drive that lists out the ones that we listed as no change, with just some minor changes for date changes. We did just move the IBS one from that, no change, but adding the conversation we just talked about, because after we made that decision after this list was published.
I just changed it.
Oh, thank you. And then the changes yet to be determined. You just saw those changes that that the specials committee has recommended to you. And then we are recommending that we delete the one-time certification stipend buyout, and we can set aside for the moment the plan time one. But if we reach an agreement, the recommendation would be to delete that one as well. But once again, the plan time one, we can wrap that conversation as part of our larger plan time conversation that we have to cover.
Marty, you have your hand up, sir.
I think we also discussed having an MOA around forming a committee to look at special education plan time. I don't know if we want to table that for now.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a modification either we make to the plan time memo itself, or, just reach common agreement that that's what we're going to do. I think, like I said, I think I joked slightly about this before, but I'm pretty sure Heather Grecius and others would not allow us to let that ride. But that's a good catch, Marty. And so as part of that elementary conversation, if we want to modify that MOA, that might be the course to do it if that's the will of the group.
You just got a thumbs up from Marty, Dave.
Okay.
Other things to consider. Chris.
So one of the things that I believe is something we may need to possibly visit about as we come back is evaluation. Certainly as we went to remote learning this year, we adopted an MOA to deal with the very dramatic change in the circumstances for the spring. There are so many different possibilities about how school looks come August, and whether it's consistent throughout the course of the year, that I think we may need to talk about evaluation. And instead of dealing with a lot of hypotheticals and unknowns right now, I think it's more productive for us likely to talk through it in some format in the fall. But I just wanted to toss it out and see if others thought the same.
I mean, I definitely, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mila.
I was just wondering whether the Apex committee as our collaborative representative group in the fall, is charged with designing or coming up with how it'll be implemented that year. Does that standing structure serve, or do we need to add a layer of some other, to Chris's point, some other language?
So my read of the MOA as I'm reading through the Apex, it is definitely its job is to advise and consider all the different perspectives and realities of the law and implementation. So I would say that as far as a committee that would be kicked off, that would do that work, I mean, they're already charged to me several times of the year and do this work. They've already started that to some extent. I think frozen.
Okay. Other input around that?
Sorry, my back. Sorry.
You're back.
Nope.
Your
Okay.
camera's frozen.
I'm not
Your
sure.
audio's okay.
I'm gonna turn off my camera. I'm having connectivity issues. You'll be able to hear me. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So I think that the committee would have to do the work to figure out what kind of changes, and if we need to do, whether it's a modification of our language in the evaluation article or come up with other, they would way of doing it. They would be the ones to do it, and we've already charged as part of our meeting of the year to make this for both remote learning, potentially evaluation, and also just how to streamline the process this year.
So Dave, not to interrupt you, but Jody, it looked like everybody is almost frozen on my screen. People are.
We seem to be having some issues, but your images are frozen now.
I only got what you said.
Yeah, our connection is real warble.
Yeah, and that's probably on Zoom. It's 10 o'clock. A lot of Zoom meetings start right hour, so it's probably back in. So.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Really quick, hold on.
So I'm thinking that we would break into some caucus groups and review all that we've heard this morning, answer questions, and then maybe come back and see if we're ready to take some action on any or all of these.
Okay. And I'm not sure if Jody's there. She said she'd be back in a second. So, okay. So go into some caucus. Milo, Dave, how long do you want?
Would 20 minutes do it? 15, 20? What do you think, Dave?
I think if we do for this time block.
Dave, I lost. Yeah, say it again, please.
I'm saying yes.
20 minutes?
Thumbs up. Yeah.
Okay. Jody, so if we could get 20 minutes for our caucus groups, that would be great.
Yep, if you could just give me a second, I'm setting them up right now.
Okay.
I'm in broken out in 3, so I had to go back.
Okay.
Apologize about that.
No, you're good. No worries. All right, 20 minutes?
Yep.
Yes.
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Thanks, Jody.
Here we go.
believe we are all back. David, Jim, if you're there.
All right. He said, I'm here. I'm not sure Jim is.
Yeah, I see his name.
There he
Jim
is.
is here.
He's there. All right. So let's do caucus reports. So Dave, I'll start with you.
Okay. We had a good conversation about our, all the different topics for this morning. Real positive. The one piece that we noticed that we usually handle separately, but kind of got rolled into this conversation because of the rolling of the contract date is usually we have in the past few years talked about moving the effective date of the contract date 1 year forward. So to accomplish that, we would be talking about July 30th of 25 instead of July 30th of 24, which is what the current draft states. So if that was amenable to everybody, that was just the only small piece. Like I said, not quite in, we usually, like I said, take care of it in a separate space. But that was the only thing that we, as we talked through and addressed it, came up with.
Okay. Mila caucus report.
Yeah, we felt good about the suggestions that were made. We had some clarifying conversation, but no concerns or changes to be made. I think we're comfortable with what we've heard and moving forward. So I would propose that maybe Jim and Dave call some questions.
Okay. Mila, did your group talk at all about what Dave just talked about?
We did not, but
okay.
I guess let me just ask my group for a temperature check. I don't anticipate that there would be any concern. Are you all okay with rolling it forward by a year to 2025? Could we just see a thumb if you were?
Yeah, from the administrative group. Yep, I've got all the thumbs up. So
okay.
Yep. All right, sounds good. So do you want to go
I've changed it in the document.
Okay, sounds good. Do you want to go section by section to thumbs up, or are you looking at, okay, so let's start with the number one, contract dates.
So
is that right? Contract dates is the first one? Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see your thumbs. Laura Leppi, okay, that one's got consensus.
Sandy, are your dogs thumbs up in this picture? Oh, she's probably not with us. Huh?
She may not be with us yet. She's coming back at 10, but I don't know if she made it back or not.
All right.
And she hasn't turned off or turned on her mic to say she is. So
yeah, I'm here. I came in about 5 minutes ago and I'm not completely clear on what the elephant was and what we're voting on.
No elephant. The first one was the contract dates, the very first one we talked about.
You mean rolling the contract up to August, or what date?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So we're voting on thumbs up for that right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, then yes. Okay.
Okay, so you now have and Sandy, can you turn your camera on?
Yeah.
There you go. So I can see your thumb. That's great. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, second one, extended negotiations. Everybody understand what that is? We've got consensus on that.
Right.
Okay, SPED letter, is that right?
Mm-hmm. The 26.6.
Article 26.6. Yeah.
Yep, that's the one. Jim, we have consensus on that one as well. Elementary specials was the next one. And that was the recommendation.
Looks like everybody.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, consensus on that one. And then MOUs is what or MOAs is what I have on the next one. Is that correct?
Hey, Dave, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I thought we were going section by section for the contract realignment language. And I want to make sure that admin is okay with teacher directed starting in August instead of September. I want to make sure that's okay with them.
Oh,
I'm okay with it, but.
Thank you very much, Colleen. I think there was conversation, and I appreciate you bringing that up very much. And I think based on what I heard that we ought to leave that alone, that was just an overreach and not part of the intention to change the structure of that. That was really more of one of those find and replace gone mad kinds of. So I would think
Okay,
that
I
we
see
should
it.
take it back to August, to September, and I'll amend that right now, if that's okay with everybody. Are we still thumbs up on that?
Can we
Just
just do
wanna
a
make
revote real
sure.
quick?
Yep.
I want to
Yep.
make sure because it just slipped right in there and I didn't even.
Yeah,
You know
thank
what?
you, Colleen.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you doing that. So as Mila just described it, are you still thumbs up on that? Let me see your thumbs.
So that's Article 27, and I've
Yep.
changed the language.
Okay, all right.
Looks right.
Looks good. All right. So the last one, number 5, is the MOAs. Is that correct?
Yep. Traditionally, we've gone through them one at a time, just for formality's sake.
Right. And do you want to do that now?
Yes, please.
Go through them one at a time?
Mhm.
And Dave, does everybody have them in front of them?
So the unchanged ones, except for dates, are listed in the contract. The ones that we've pulled out, we've either done the IBS, the specials, and the other ones are just there's no changes to them except for dates, as I said. So they're in the contract as written.
And I think we talked about those last time, and because I have as is written on the bottom of all of them. So would you look through them very quickly? No, I'm not going to do that to you. Would you look through them and see if there's anything that you need to talk about? I have the one on page 124, Dave. I have that as a sunset. Did I have that right?
I'm getting to one page to 124.
One-time certified compensation stipend buyout.
Yeah, that's
yes,
a sunset.
in the
Mhm.
yep, on the summary sheet that was listed as a delete.
Okay. All right. So look through those. Are there any that you need to talk about, Dave?
Not at this time, although like we mentioned previously, we had hoped to talk about some of them in this setting and in this timing. We believe that we couldn't do those conversations justice.
Okay.
Starts on page 106.
Okay. Linda.
So the last one under delete, it has to do with the teacher planning time. We aren't going to delete that until that's resolved, right?
Right.
That is correct.
Okay.
We'll make that part of our conversation with plan time.
Other questions? Give you a little more time. You'll see some people reading, so. Let me know when you're ready.
Hey, Dave, I just had a question on the induction licensure one.
Yep.
I just had a note written in my written document. Expand induction to teachers who come to district with other credentials. I mean, I know we're not going to talk about it. So in rolling this over, it just leaves it the same and just for another year. Is that right? And then next year we would talk about anything like that.
That would be my intention, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Still see some people looking through, so be patient, folks.
Colleen, do you have a question?
I was wondering if I heard correctly earlier that the Apex piece would be taken care of when we figure out next year. Is that what Chris had said? I can't find you on my screen, Chris. There you are.
I don't think we would rewrite the MOA as a part of Apex. We would wait for negotiations. But if there are any intermediate sort of things to respond to or deal with, Apex would be the group that would be making those decisions and recommendations. And then it could be that something flows into IBS for next year that might change this MOA. Is that how you see it, Dave?
Yeah, I do. And I was trying to mention while we were getting all garbly that the committee has already started working on and creating guidance for what to do for next school year on how to still make evaluations as authentic but streamlined as possible. Maybe not best practice forever, but for in this next year, for example, we're recommending that instead of year-long SLOs that we do the shorter 8 to 10 week SLOs so that when we're in session, hopefully we can find a couple 8-week chunks of time that we're consistently in session to be able to do those SLOs, having evaluators do at least one, if not both, have them, sorry, at least one observation in the first semester. I know some of them move into the second semester, but having at least one, and then that way they can get the second one done in some kind of truncated fashion. And then the other question we are pondering is what kind of assistance we can start giving teachers in a remote setting to give them feedback for perpetual improvement, not necessarily from an evaluation space, but from an improvement. How do we assist teachers to be to hone their craft in that environment? So those are kind of the big chunk items that we've already started that process on.
Colleen, did that help you out? Okay. All right. Anybody else still looking through them? All right, so leaving the MOUs as is at this time, where are your thumbs?
I
think
we need to go one at a time.
You want to
Sorry.
go one at a time through them?
Yes, please.
Okay, starting on
just because
page-
there's no just so there's no confusion about which ones we're approving and which ones we're not.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. I'll do that. Starting on page 106, right? With shared decision making. Thumbs on shared decision making.
So that's no changes except any date change.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, you have consensus on that? All right, next one is page 108, induction licensure.
On our list that we're going from for the, it says the next one is assessment day.
Did I miss something here?
Yeah, Dave's going in page order in the agreement. We have out of order because we initially had these in different parts of the list, and then given the time constraints, we moved them. So they got out of the order. So
yeah, Shelley, I'm going by your contract because I can't get to the ones in your drive. So I was going page by page. So if you have a contract handy, and I'm going to ask for your thumbs again on the induction licensure, and I'll read the title of each one of them as we're going through too. So induction licensure. Okay, we have a couple of sideways thumbs. Dave, Colleen, can you talk to me about that?
My sideways is I can live with it because we have to, not because I'm happy with the not being able to address the new people to our district and other issues that we've identified.
Okay, Colleen?
Ditto.
All right, sounds good. So you have consensus on that. All right, the next one that I have is the assessment day.
That's no change to assessment day.
No, yeah, no change to assessment day. Let me see your thumbs. And we have consensus. Jim, if you see something that isn't consensus, let me know, okay?
I will.
Okay, next one that I have is no change to elementary specials professional development. Page 111. Waiting on
Looks
Linda.
good.
Okay, consensus. Okay. Next one is the educator effectiveness apex.
No changes is the recommendation.
No changes is the net recommendation at this time. Look good, Jim?
It does.
Okay. Next one, page 113, interest-based strategies committee.
We already came
And
to
you've
consensus
already
on
done
this
that.
as a
Yep,
part of the
yep,
other conversation.
You did, thank you.
Also 114, 115, Dave, we've got consensus on those.
Thank you.
And so that takes us to 116 compensation committee.
All righty, compensation committee as is, correct?
Leave it as it is, yeah.
Yep. And that's 116 and 117.
Yeah,
isn't it?
and
Okay.
the leave it as it is I think because, well, we're going to be talking compensation in our next session together, and it could be that something comes out of that, but for this session, it's fine to sit right where it is. We
Okay.
may, as a group, pull it back out and say, let's make a change in our June conversation.
Right. Okay, so the compensation study committee.
So no
as
change
is.
for now.
No change for now. Looks like consensus.
Yes.
All right, page 118, strategic communication as is. Jim? Okay.
Good.
All right, page 119, implementation of innovation schools as is. Okay. Okay, teacher planning time, that's what we're working on next, right?
That's right. So we're not going
Okay.
to make any motion on that.
Not doing anything on that one. So the next one is sabbatical leave as is.
Looks good.
Okay. Okay. Multi-tiered systems of support advisory committee.
Leave it as it is.
Yep, as is. Yep. Okay, looks good, right,
Looks
Jim?
good. Yep.
Next one, 123, additional professional development calendar day as is, right?
Check.
As is.
Okay, consensus.
I think so.
Did we miss somebody, Jim?
Marty, I don't know. I can't see Marty's.
Oh, there
you
he
go.
is. There he is. All right. And then we have the one on 124 is sunsetted, right?
Right.
And so do we have others?
So you want to take thumbs on the sunsetting of that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. One-time certified compensation stipend buyout sunsetting. And there's consensus on that.
Check.
Terrific.
And that's all of them, right? All right. Very good. Good work, folks.
So those, we have consensus on those, or in other words, tentative agreement. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yay!
So our TA'd folder has all of a sudden gotten a whole lot fuller.
That's awesome.
So I have been porting in our copies of the agreements. I've left the where what we were working on where they were, but put a copy of it in the TA'd folder just so that there's not any confusion. It may be in both spaces, but the TA'd one is the final version that we have agreement on.
Great. Thanks for doing that, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
No problem.
All right. So are we back to elementary planning time then?
Yeah, and I think I'd like to suggest that some members of my team would like to just share, I think, a few comments or perceptions kind of in this space. Oh, Kathy, good idea. Do we need a little 5-minute break?
I do.
Okay.
It's okay.
5 minutes.
So Jody.
10:52?
Yep, 10:52. Let's come back at 10:52.
Jody, can you give us a blank screen? Or
yep,
you
I'm
can
on
just...
it.
Okay, thanks, Jody.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Jody.
Yeah.
Am I the only one still here? No.
No, everyone's still here. They're just all on mute.
I'm here. I just blocked my video.
Same with me, Heather.
Hey, Dave and Jim. Are you guys there?
I am now.
Does everybody know what I'm doing so I don't look like a jerk doing like housework while this is going on?
We did a survey of that, and we found out there were 2 people in Pennsylvania who weren't sure.
I just mean people on the team, really.
Oh, I'm not sure if they do know, Sandy.
I'm enjoying the tour of North Glen High School. P.S.
It's my 30-gallon fish tank that's giving me stress right now.
Oh no.
Oh, wow.
That's really why I'm here.
I was gonna even tell you, I was like, just let it play out. We'll just watch you pack. That's choice.
Come on. And my fish have gotten huge since I left, and they're hard to catch. Come here, dude.
Well, congratulations.
They're growing.
Can't even see you, Sandy.
Yeah. Sign of a healthy environment.
So if anybody wants to come and help me carry this out of here, that'd be great. I don't know if you can see me, but
I can't see you, Sandy, so I don't know
I
where
can
you went.
I can see her too.
Oh, yeah, I can see you. It's a fisheye view.
there's my, there's my fishies. I finally got it. And this gigantic thing has to
Wow.
come out of here somehow.
That's a big project.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that I wasn't just blowing everything off.
We knew you wouldn't do that, Sandy.
That's right.
Oh, thank you for your trust.
Honestly, I think these remote sessions have had the best attendance of any series of IBS meetings, with nobody really being gone for any extended period of time.
I know.
I would agree with that, Dave.
I can take you with me.
Yeah, exactly. We just come along with whatever other obligation you have.
I was telling my boss that I've worked harder during this than I ever have before, because everybody knows where I am. So it's not hard to find me.
Hey, Dave and Jim, we'll need to resurrect the story document for the next portion. So I don't know who wants to be scribe and whether you've got that handy.
Let's see.
So Jim, let's see.
So we,
Go ahead, Jim.
that's attached to the, no, it isn't part of the melding document, is it?
It's not.
I think, where is it? It's in the folder titled Elementary Planning Time.
It starts
And then
off story continued.
I'm opening it up to see if it
It's
says
called
that.
Elementary Planning Time Charts, and the charts is in quotations. I think that's.
Yes, it does start with story continue from.
That's what I have.
Oh, yeah. Once you're in the document.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So Jim, do you want to type, or do you want me to?
You know, I've been looking forward to typing for so many days.
Very nice.
Sounds good. So, Mila, you said you had some
Yeah.
things that your group wanted to talk about.
I still see a half a dozen people not back on camera, so
Okay.
let's give them just a second.
Sounds good. They're popping in now.
Yeah.
And Dave, I know I can't raise my hand. I don't want to sit there with my hand up the whole time. So when Mila's group has had whoever wants to speak, if I could be put on the speaking order wherever is appropriate. So I don't have to wave at you a million times.
Go ahead and wave. You're right next to me on my screen right now.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
All right. So thanks. I think we'd like to share just some perceptions, concerns. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for the team that they didn't necessarily rise to issue or elephant. Maybe let me not say that. Let them name their own issue or concern. And then I think we'd like to revisit some story, but we just would like to share some perspectives. So Chris, do you want to start?
Sure.
So
Happy to
before
jump
we
in.
start, just a minute, I have
Yep.
the document in front of me, but for some reason, it's not allowing me to edit. I'm not sure what I've done incorrectly.
I will work on that so that by the time I get to story, hopefully we'll be able to get you in there.
Okay.
And Jim, if you can't do that, I can write on mine. So just let us know. So Chris, we're to you again. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Dave. So thanks for letting me jump in. As I said earlier, just felt like there were some issues to chat about around planning time, and I'm happy just to talk about some of my conversations and activities since our last meeting. After we concluded our last IBS session, I had update meetings with a variety of members, administrative and board members of the team. And in those conversations, I was either hearing of myself or hearing from others, words like shocked, surprised, frustrated, disappointed. It was largely around the amount of minutes to be allocated for planning time, 315 versus a 225. As I heard those words, whenever I hear lots of words around emotion and feelings, to me that characterizes something that either is or has the potential to become an issue or an elephant that we need to talk about as a team. So at that point, I asked Mila to set a convening of the administrative and board member participants of the broader team. That happened yesterday afternoon. There's also some survey work that we talked about doing as we reported out at the end of the last session of principles around planning time and minutes that Mila also launched at the same time. As we came together yesterday, a few things that were important game rules. We didn't want to get into a spot of saying we're taking a positional stance as administrative and board members of this broader team about how much planning time should or shouldn't be. The focus really was in checking in with each member about how they were feeling and getting out emotions, feelings, reactions to where we were last time. What became clear to me then is we have quite a few newer members, brand new members to the IBS process on the administrative board member side of the team. I don't know that there have been many experiences, if any, of dealing with an issue or elephant for those newer members so far. And I just think it's healthy when you have these kinds of things going on to get them out on the table and talk through them. I do believe there's some more story that folks raised about wanting to talk through in that course of the discussion. I think there's some further thinking about how the 30-minute push may affect schedules and things like ERD time and the amount of time we have in groups to work together. Some people may feel like that's relevant to the planning time discussion, other people not. There's certainly across that group of administrator and board member parts of our broader team, a wide variety of opinions too about where we left the other day. And some people have those emotions of maybe frustration, disappointment. Some others may not, in what I heard reported the other day. So I'm just sharing this out with you. I think our norm is when we have a caucus that we do a report out, and we had one, and I think it's important just to give you that perspective. And then I'll just finish with my part. So in terms of some of my feelings, I was one of the people who was in the frustrated place around what seemed like a pretty positional conversation around minutes in our last setting and maybe the time before. I worry when we go in a pretty dramatically different position on something like planning time after 2 years of committee study, that we might be missing implications, or we may miss parts of the story, or there may be things that, because we've not had more time to soak it through with lots of stakeholders, that we could land in a bad spot. So that was one thing that frustrated me. For better or worse, I'm a processor. For some of you, it drives you probably nuts that Godowski makes everything in production, whether it's a school start time decision or a change to retirement vendors or just about anything. My style tends to be get lots of perspective, go through a lot of process, make sure we minimize unintended consequences. I wish I could get that out of my system, but it is who I am. And I think it most of the time works out okay. And there's times that I wish I would do it different. But I have that worry and I had that frustration. Beyond that, part of what I heard as some people were sharing out was, and I heard this in some of the meetings I was a part of, small group and otherwise last week, this piece about, basically paying for planning time or getting planning time in lieu of compensation in years past. I get that part of the story very much. At least for me, given all the challenges I've seen our system go through around school funding and a variety of other things, but especially school funding the last 10 years, I guess my prevailing interest is, as we did with sick leave bank and the deficits that we had years ago, I think at a certain point you have to leave some things in the past. You have to be mindful of the past. But I don't have an interest myself in keeping score about some of the work we've done in the past. I think we're in unique and challenging times right now on a variety of issues. And my hope is that finding the right answers for educators, for kids, for administrators on issues like planning time becomes one of our core interests. And as we were sharing out interests before, that's what I had heard. And I worried that we might be drifting from that. So that's my part, just owning thoughts, feelings, perspectives. Feels good to share it out with the group. I would invite others who were part of that caucus meeting the other day, if you have things you'd like to add to what I've shared, to do so. And then maybe we can transition on to Dave and some others from there.
Okay, go ahead, Darren.
And I would like to just start with saying that I was one of the new people and trying to figure out, kind of how to maneuver through all these meetings and stuff. And being that this is the space that I live in every day, the elementary space. So this is pretty, it's a strong point for what we're going to be doing daily. It scares me to think that this small of a group makes such a huge decision for all of the students in Adams 12. And I just think that I came into this process thinking that we were getting more time for teachers at the elementary level. And I was absolutely stoked that that was happening. But to me, it felt like it shifted from time for teachers turned into personal time for teachers, not time for teachers to be prepped for students. And I think that's the area that I'm real foggy in right now, is it time for teachers to do what they need to do, which is what we've given them already, which is awesome. They need that time. But now we have a chance to truly move mountains with our data and with our teams. And I think that if we could truly focus on that idea of getting time for teachers, but also getting time for what needs to be done for kids. And I just think that's the foggy area I'm in. And I'm just, again, I'm going to use the new guy card again, but it's truly just the time that we have that's in front of us is going to be outstanding. And we can get more into the story of how it can be used, but it pains me that I'm the one representative for elementary when this is such an impactful thing for all the elementary schools, especially elementary.
So I have Colleen's hand up right now.
Hi, sorry. I was writing down my thoughts. First, Chris, I think you were talking about me. I think sometimes when something comes out of the blue, because I think that planning time is a separate issue than ERD time in my mind. So when it came up, I felt a little blindsided. And sometimes I do, being here so long, so many years that we worked so hard when we couldn't get money for teachers because there was no money. We made their lives better by making their work environment better. And so it's painful to be one of those people who worked on that stuff and to let it go. What's one of the reasons why I asked to go to caucus last time is so that I could get away from the history and look at what was practical and what was a solution for that. And I felt much better after we had that conversation, even though it may not have seemed like that. And I guess the other thing is there's this rub, I think, that we feel sometimes, that because we're asking for teacher directed time, that means we're asking to be by ourselves, not doing things for kids. And I know that's probably not what you mean, but I think that's kind of what comes up in emotions when we get in that oppositional space. Teacher directed time doesn't mean I'm not working with my other colleagues for the betterment of students. In fact, I spend every minute of my planned time working for the betterment of my students, and I think all teachers do. So I think I'd like you to keep in mind that when we're asking for teacher directed time, we're not asking for things that are, I'm just going to go have a cup of coffee or go off to have lunch or do something. I am there for the betterment of the student. And sometimes when I ask for that teacher directed time, I'm still working for the students. I'm still there for those kids. And so those were my two thoughts when you guys were talking.
So folks, we are exercising an elephant right now. I want you to know that this is an issue. So I'm taking people as they raise their hands. So other discussion on this, Dave?
I wanted to share out, during the checkout, I said not an issue at this time because I wanted to wait until this space to have a conversation. And I also want to make a similar report out to Chris per kind of our conversations before. I did also brought together my group this week because I felt like we were all getting into a space of position. And, you know, I felt like we were in a cycle, all of us, of statements back and forth, comments that we stopped looking at options and stopped looking for solutions and started focusing in on the bad actors in our past experiences, whether that was bad actors, teachers, bad actor administrators. I've had both in my experience. I've had the teacher who misuses their plan time. I've had the administrator who misuses my plan time. I've had all of it. I've seen all of it in my role here. And, you know, the thing that I got frustrated myself at, and I don't know if you caught my checkout, but I didn't have words to talk about it because I couldn't articulate at the time my frustration, was watching us move from being solution oriented to being problem oriented. We were trying to fit this discussion around minutes. And I'm not here to talk about a set of minutes or what time, what number that should be. But we went from looking at this conversation through the context of the language for which we had already discussed, and had a conversation about minutes in our old construct of the way time looked like before. And I'm not here to debate. We can get to a small group for that part where I can maybe spend more time talking about why I feel like the conversation lost focus on the construct, because it became, to me, I felt like the conversation became about who got to control the time, not what the time was used for, but was I going to get to control the time as a teacher? Was the administrator going to get to control the time? And not about the purpose of and the construct and the structure of that time. We agreed to language that specifically drove every minute of non-instructional time to being about supporting students. And, you know, designating how much of that should be controlled by the administrator as the driver of the facilitator, however you want to phrase it, or the educator being the facilitator, the leader. That became our conversation, not about how do we best create constructs for kids and to do our work. It became a power struggle that I watched people go through. I saw both sides, both the groups, myself included, using language that I didn't like around taking or stealing or just not enough time. And, you know, if we look back at the language that was put forward, we specifically, that elementary committee, and I've been working on it for a long time. So I too have a little bit of ownership and a little bit of, frustration when we're not taking it into context. We specifically wrote in that it's not about who's in the room, it's about who's doing the work. Because I have a belief that the person who is leading, the person who is doing the hard work of facilitating and leading, is the one who's doing the learning in that space. And and they're going to get mad at me, but I had a hard conversation with my folks, and I said to them, you know, we need to, if we have a problem with a meeting or a training, then we need to take the professional responsibility of making it better. And the same thing with our administrative colleagues. If we have a problem with teachers not doing their job or if not doing it well, then we need to take the responsibility to make it work within the constructs that we're creating. We don't need to punish good administrators or good teachers in order to take our responsibility, professional responsibility. And now I'm rambling a little bit, so that's a clear sign that I need to let the next person go.
Okay, I have Kathy and then Deborah.
So as someone without history, and this won't affect my daily life, I'll just share just some observations that were really hard. First of all, I will say I respect each and every one of you as professionals. And I realize that when you're talking about this issue, it's personal. And when story or a way something is presented comes across that maybe that professionalism isn't respected on either side, it hurts and it changes the conversation. And I believe that administrators who plan those times where you're working together really think that they're doing it for the right reasons. And I believe that educators who want their own time to plan are doing it for the right reasons too. And for me, what happened was a little bit of a panic mode, a little bit, because, we had on the board side had several meetings about moving start time. And actually, a lot of the feedback was that people wanted to keep it the same. And Chris made a hard decision to move it. And a good part of moving it was to allow this opportunity for teacher plan time. And the 225 had always been in my brain that this is, people had decided that this was the minimum and this is what we needed to provide. And the 30-minute push was going to allow that. And we had kind of talked through some different ideas. And then I saw some different ideas coming up about different amounts of time. And I'm like, okay, I didn't necessarily understand where that was coming from. So I felt a little bit taken off guard for that. And then I think I was one of them in our group where it started to be like, well, if it's 3:15 and that's the only number and the administrators are telling me they need other minutes, then what are the other minutes we have together? And I think that's where the ERD time came in, not because it became about minutes and wrestling back minutes from each other. And again, we've already exercised the control thing, but it's like, well, then that crosses into another area we've already negotiated about. But if we're truly going to talk about minutes, then I don't know. So I'm just saying that I hope you know that I just want to see what's best for the system. And I'm going on feedback from different meetings about, I do know teachers are creative and they do great work together. And I do know that the people who run buildings talk about wanting more of that time. And especially for those schools that come forward to us that are in turnaround or priority improvement, they always talk about needing to get all their teachers on the same page and what they need to do and to work together and to build culture and climate. And part of that is enough time to be together. So I don't want to do anything in the contract that, again, I want everybody to have what they need. That's my interest, and I'll be quiet.
I have Deborah and then Nancy.
I think for me, a big elephant that maybe put me positional was us getting outside of the process. And I think Chris has already addressed this a tiny bit, but I wanted to speak a little bit more to it. ERD was not ever part of the story, and I think, or interest. And so when that started coming up, that became an elephant for me because it was outside story, and therefore it was outside of process for me, at least as I understand it. And I still feel like I'm relatively new, even after 4 years, to all of this. I feel like process, if that comes up, then process means we need to go back to story. and put ERD on there and then go through interests. And then we can revisit some of these other issues, because I felt like ERD was not what we were discussing. We were discussing plan time, and ERD is different to me than plan time. So that was a big elephant for myself, which definitely I know put my back up. I apologize if I didn't handle that properly, and I will absolutely work on that, but that was my elephant, and that was absolutely what put me in that positional space.
I have Nancy and then Matt. Nancy, you're muted still. There you go.
So I had two frustrations with this. When we started the charge to the committee to look at this, it said we were looking at elementary planning time. And then all of a sudden this year, it has expanded to the other levels. And I think that's created a lot more of a problem than we might have anticipated. And I think some of that came to light on Monday and probably before then, but that was a frustration to me. I mean, elementary planning time has been an issue since I was a principal 20 years ago. So I certainly would like to see it solved. So that was one of my frustrations. My other frustration is more around language. And that is using the term educators, because I consider that all of you are educators, from the school board on down actually to the people that take care of our schools. They're all educators for the kids. The kids learn from all of them. And this contract is between the district and the teachers. So that's kind of an elephant for me, that the term educators being used as opposed to teachers being used, or certified teachers being used. Okay.
I have Matt and then Marty.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there, what threw me off was similar to what Nancy was talking about, is having sat on this team for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, and trying to get elementary fixed up with people definitely weren't being treated correctly, and seemed like there's an issue there for sure for me over the past year and a half. But we didn't get into this whole idea of a set like X number of minutes that would then affect the whole system. And I definitely understand the desire to have things as simple as possible in the contract. I would want that too, but there's things that get different. And the trouble with that I felt on Monday, and even the one before, as we started getting into that, is there could be implications at the other levels. And I don't think it's quite as simple. We all know that technically, like a high school standard teacher has more free planning minutes. That's pretty standard. We know that. However, buildings do run differently, and want to make sure that what we do doesn't affect people in ways we don't know about. So when we start making bigger statements, there are bigger implications, and that's what kind of got me in like a little bit of a freak out mode. And knowing that I'm representing all of the high school principals, that's a lot of kids we're dealing with, and a lot of frankly different buildings, and what we do within those schedules. So that's what kind of got me on the like, whoa, what are we doing here? And I wanted to be really careful. So I wouldn't really call it an elephant. It's just like, whoa, I need to be smart about that.
I have Marty and then Dave.
Hearing Deborah talk really made me think, and I think that I'm coming from a similar place as she. I felt like I came into this conversation, and it wasn't about minutes, it was about carving out the minutes that we needed to meet contract. So finding those 225 minutes for elementary teachers. And so when we started shifting the conversation away from that, because I felt like we had a solution and the bell change was there, and there was a lot of work going into that, I felt taken off guard. So just wanted to put that out there and say that I think that's the being taken off guard like that was put me in a positional state. And so that's my confession. Thank you.
Dave and then Teresa.
I think language is incredibly powerful. I try very hard to watch my phraseology and make sure that the words that I'm using is what I intend to use, and not to use inflammatory language. And sometimes you'll see I don't say things at times, or I think too long. I think that's something Chris and I have in common that drives Sandy Sorensen absolutely crazy, is that we take way too long to think about stuff to make sure we're in the right process space. And so I just caution all of us. But the thing that I just wanted to also add in was the word educator versus teacher in the contract. Our contract covers not just classroom teachers, it covers counselors, it covers social workers, psychologists, OTs, PTs, many of whom are very offended when we refer to everybody under this contract as teachers, because they have spent years and thousands of dollars and a lot of pride in their profession. And I don't really have a particular diehard that it has to be educator or certified educator or certified personnel, whatever the right terminology is. I just want to make sure that when we use language in our contract and in our documents, because I believe these are value statements, that we make sure that this document expresses the value that we have as an organization. And I want to make sure that we value all of the people for which this is supposed to cover. And so, like I said, I'm not diehard on any one particular terminology. I just know from folks who get very offended when we use the word teacher in the contract instead of some other terminology. I've seen certified educator, I've seen certified person. I don't, like I said, I don't have a heartburn over one or the other. I just want to make sure that when we write a document, that it institutes the values we have as an organization. And that's why I insisted when we wrote some of that original plan time language to have those preambles put in there about the intent and purpose, about our common belief and shared interests around planning and collaboration, whether it was individually directed or administratively directed, that words were in there, because that's the shared value that we're agreeing to in that space and creating the construct for that time. For the first time, defining that space as not just a space that is hands off, but a space that is, we're going to have this teacher directed time, but there's an expressed shared understanding and purpose, which is moving forward student operations and learning and the mission of our profession. So that's my belief on this document being, and I'm saying this because in perfect, I have it sitting in front of me right here. Normally when we're in session, I have it right here and you can see me go, this document, sorry, this right here, this document. But I noticed you can't see it in the little box. The words are powerful because it sends the message and we need to make sure we send the correct one.
Teresa.
So being new to the group, I have really enjoyed our work together this first year. I know we haven't done a whole lot, but I feel like I'm still learning the process. So I sit back and I take in and I want to hear each perspective. And I feel like we're really good about that. And I started to feel lost through this process. I started to feel like there were sides, and then it didn't feel good. And I was checking myself too, because I'm like, I want to know that I'm taking in everybody's perspective, but I'm also giving point of view as an administrator. And then I got a little nervous when we started talking about the minutes and how it would impact other levels when we were focused on elementary. So like Matt said, the last meeting, I feel like we need to check with, our colleagues and see what impact this would have. And so now knowing a little bit of that information, I'm glad that happened, because there are implications, and I know we're going to get that. want to say that I hope we continue to follow the process because it seems like it works really well. I feel like we lost our way, and I felt like I was having to pick sides, and I don't want to feel that way. I want us to continue to collaborate and work together. And just being new, I felt like I was not sure if we were going outside the process, but it became clear the more that we talked about it, we were not following our process. Thank you.
Laura Mitchell and then Bo.
Well, I'll just tag on to some of the things that Kathy brought up. And again, I'm new, so, I've not been through an elephant. I'm just sharing out some of the things that are in my mind. And one of the things I'll say about when we did our breakout sessions, we were in 2 different rooms that day, I think. But anyway, there was a breakout session that happened that was very different from the one I was in. And so I think there's some people feeling, some people's feelings are different because of the room they were in. And so I think that is just something to keep in your mind. But tagging on to what Kathy was talking about with changing start times, I sit on the admin as a rep, and that's my group, but as a Board of Ed member, we're about the system. We're looking at this. We want to, to help support the whole system and how to bring that all together to meet everyone's needs and, and serve our kids and our community. And the changing start times was something that was, we took a lot of time to think about that and talk about that. And as a middle school parent just recently, I can appreciate the challenge that this 30-minute push is going to have to those parents and families and those kids. So I think that was something that, as difficult as it is, it was really important in understanding the need for our elementary schools to get this time to be able to, improve their planning time. And again, going back to, we really were focused on elementary. And as we're looking at this and the discussion around that this is expanding possibly to the system, both all the secondary schools as well, I think we need to be thinking about the fact that in addition to changing start times, our high schools, some of them are changing their schedules because we're moving all of our high schools to a common schedule. And so our high schools are already going to be dealing with trying to replan, and they may not look exactly like they look today. So that's going to, that's something that I think our high schools are going through. And so I would, as far as getting back to the elementary time and making sure that those, the people in that system have what they need. I just think, and being a Board of Ed member, it's been, talked about last year when I wasn't on the committee, we have this, we're not in compliance with our contract and we're trying to do what we can and we need to find a way to make this work. And we were struggling with 225. And so, that's what I thought we were trying to get to. And it says it's a minimum of a certain number of minutes, not the maximum. And, when we start talking about where we're going to move that to, or we might move it to, when you're looking at it from a board member, you're thinking about things like, how can this affect, our ability to meet this, and where can we put our board, and our community in, and trying to meet the needs of our team to serve students in the future and being in compliance or not in compliance. And that's not what it's all about, but it's about creating something that we believe we can stand behind and we're going to be able to meet for the long term that's going to, meet the needs of kids. And I feel like when we start getting into this hard and fast about how many minutes, we've gone into the shared decision-making process that we were talking about putting into the elementary school teams to make those decisions about, at our school, yes, we have this minimum, But at our school, the right place and the right way to work this is, you know, part of the shared decision making. And for one school, that may mean more minutes for self-directed planning time, and another school that may be more with coaches or admin. I feel like sometimes we're moving into a space of where we were trying to get to with leaving some of this decision into a school-based shared decision-making space. So those are just some of the thoughts that I was having, and I hope this was the right place to put those.
It was, Laura. We are exercising an elephant, which is part of the process. So those of you who are new, don't feel uncomfortable with the conversation. That's what we're doing right now. Bo.
Yeah, I was just gonna, although new this year, I've been a part of this team before, and at a time and a place where the exercising of elephants was unfortunately pretty routine in our early years of IBS, and we got through it, and we'll get through this one as well, and it is uncomfortable. I just wanted to share a couple of things. One, I think I said back, it seems like forever ago, when we were able to meet face to face. Fundamentally, I believe so strongly that our teachers absolutely need copious amount of time away from kids to do the work that they need to do to prepare well. There is no question that you can't do this job well without lots of adequate time to prepare for it. Sometimes alone, collecting your thoughts, reflecting individually, oftentimes with others. And I agree 100% with what Colleen said. The vast majority of time, I know our teachers, when they have the time, use it in that way. And similar to what Darren said, I'm thrilled that we've been able to figure out a way that we could carve out more time at elementary, because I'm an elementary guy. I came up in this system as an elementary teacher all the way through. And Nancy's right, forever, the planning time at elementary has been a real challenge because of the nature of our day, all for the right reasons. As a teacher, I needed to meet to think about my evaluation. I needed to return calls for parents. I needed to be a part of various student meetings. And that 225, by virtue of the way we defined it in the elementary day, was routinely eaten away and never protected. And I think our committee and the bold move to shift bell times has allowed us to now really have a legitimate lane at being able to provide and protect, truly protect time at the elementary level moving forward. And what became difficult, and I get it, because of this pressure we all have around making sure that that time away from kids is really protected and valued, because it is so important to the time with kids being as valuable and on point as it can be, is getting to a point that by the very nature of who's participating, somehow the quality of the planning or the use of the time was either enhanced or diminished. And though Dave's right, we've all been in situations where that's been true. To universally get to a point where we did, and I'm culpable in this too, the last couple of weeks, where one type of planning or one type of minutes was absolutely better because of who was participating. That was hard to swallow, because I know everybody in this room and everyone we represent comes to work every day with the right intention for kids. And so I just want to get to a place where we celebrate and embrace the importance of time to work on practice, to work on craft, to overcome problems, and celebrate that we found more time with that, and not get to a point where really what I'm interested in is who gets to own it and charge it. That's not the right driver for our system. That's not the right driver for our students.
Okay, I have no one else on the speaking list. So Mila, you had mentioned that you might have more story. Do we want to get that up now?
Yeah, I think if we could, maybe
So,
just.
excuse me, Mila, for just a minute, so we can keep track of this. I still am not able to edit the document.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. So Dave, you may need
I'm
to.
not sure, because it says that you did edit it, or at least got into it, Jim.
Yeah,
so
I can get into it, but I can't edit it, is the problem. That's where I've tried restarting the document.
Well, like I said, it says that you are, so I'm having troubles figuring out what, because you have access and you have all the information. I'd be more than glad to do some typing in this space, or if Dave wants to, or something else.
Yeah, Dave, I can edit it. I'm already ready to go. Chris, you have your hand up.
So I just want to say, from my perspective, issues, elephants, either that were there or were in the making, have been exercised. I feel grateful for that. It feels a little bit like the times that you get in a fight with your wife before you head off to work, and then you have the conversation after the end of the day. And it's such a relief to have the conversation and to hear things from from her perspective that hadn't been in my mind before. I feel really good. I just want to check in and make sure that the rest of the team feels like the elephant and issues are exercised too, and that we can move on to story.
I appreciate
That's a
that,
great
Chris.
point.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. Anybody else have anything to exercise here? I'll give this space to you for a little bit. And I also want to say that, you know, one of our norms is assuming good intent. The flip side of that is saying things with good intent as well. So I think you did a great job of that as we were going through the elephant, and I appreciate that. So does anybody else have anything else they need to add around the elephant itself? Otherwise, we'll push the elephant out of the room and get back to work.
And given the typing constraints, can Jim facilitate and Dave, you type?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm all ready to go with that.
And I just want to take an opportunity to go back to the process and just see if through the conversations, there's more story that needs to be shared.
Okay. So Jim, go ahead, and if somebody's
Okay.
got story, I'm ready to go.
So we're going to go back and revisit story. We have about 25 minutes left if we allow a couple of minutes for checkout. So we've been around the room several times. Let's go around the room quickly though. If you don't have anything to add, pass, and we'll make sure everybody gets a chance to do that. Who'd like to start us? Going around the room. Colleen.
I don't know about starting. I need clarification on what we're telling story about. Are we adding ERD into what we're looking at? Are we just focusing on elementary plan? Like, what is it that we're adding story around?
Dave?
What?
Dave Lockley.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize you were talking to me. I mean, I think it sounds like there's a story to be told about whether it's implications or impacts of the 30-minute push that was just decided, because that wasn't included in our story previously because that decision hadn't been made. So I'm imagining that there's probably some implications that come from that. And then I know that there are just, I think, story pieces of elements that whether it's because of the push or just what plan time looks like at the other level, because we have all encompassing language for a plan time that sounds like needs to be added into the onto the board is what it sounds like to me.
Marla?
I do think that, yeah, having had the chance to go out and confer with level colleagues a little more extensively than they had done before, there might be some story elements that would be relevant to this.
Colleen, does that answer your question? Okay, who'd like to go first then? Adding to story.
I will go.
All right, Dave.
All right. So the story I would add, since this hadn't been the case the last time we met, the district has decided to move the plan times for, the start times for elementary elementary, high school, middle school up 30 minutes, but our K-8s are remaining in their current start times. So you can put it in chart language of there's a 30-minute push for all buildings except for K-8s.
Okay, let's let Dave finish that up.
And does everybody know that we're on the elementary planning time chart document? So if you want to follow along, Dave's typing live, it's that chart document.
And we're right at the bottom of what was already written as story. Marty.
Nothing right now.
Laura Mitchell.
I think that's supposed to say move start times 30 minutes for
I'm
all
sorry,
buildings.
I was struggling because we had a lot of people talking at the same time, so thank you. Not plan times. Thank you very much for correcting that.
Nothing right now.
Darren.
Oh, darn it. Just a second, Jim.
All right.
For some odd reason, my cursor isn't working like I want it to. Hang on. Let me make sure I get it. Whoops. Okay, I'm ready.
Darren.
With a 30-minute push for elementary, that pushes it to 3 o'clock being done and contract done at 3:15. So there's no time after school for planning period.
Would you say the last part of what you said, which leads to?
Just basically, there's not a big enough block of time to do any, according to per master agreement, to do any plan period or collaboration.
Is 3:30 the end time or is it 3:15? I think it's 3:10 actually.
Correct.
3:10?
Right.
Okay.
So
Let me
Dave,
change it.
instead of 3:30, make that 3:10 if you would, please.
Oh, the end time at 3:10?
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
All right. Kathy.
Pass.
Matt.
Any adjustments in planning time language that includes minute changes will impact secondary.
Did I get that, Matt?
Sorry, Dave, my computer system's not great. I don't actually have the document up right now.
I think it is, Dave.
Okay,
I trust
thank
you.
I actually think that the word elementary is not correct there. I think if I understood Matt's intent, any adjustment to planning time minutes will affect secondary.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mila.
See, you shouldn't trust me, Matt.
That's right. Nor me. Mila.
I'm going to pass for right now.
Sandy.
Mine have already been said.
Linda.
Pass.
Pass.
Allison.
Pass.
Teresa.
Matt covered mine. I'll pass.
Deborah.
Pass for right now.
Shelley.
In our current language, all non-student contact time is self-directed.
Heather.
Pass.
Bo.
The elementary planning committee was tasked with finding more options for preserving the 225 minutes.
Colleen.
Pass.
Chris.
So I just tossed this out. I don't know if it's relevant. It feels like discussions of ERD in our last session was part of what created an elephant. but I have heard some people remarking about the 30-minute push, reducing the amount of time that will be spent in ERDs. So it's really more of a question to people in the field about whether it's a relevant part of the story. If so, there's probably others on the team who are better to tell it than me.
I can actually talk about that. Oh, Bo, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I respect and don't disagree with the sentiment that I think it did derail us a bit. And I do think fundamentally what we would view as plan time and ERD time are different, because one I think is around full staff work and one is around more team level type work. With that being said, it's important to note that by virtue of the 30-minute push unique to elementary school, their interval for ERD time is the only level that's significantly reduced. Because the contract day starting earlier, the contract day ending earlier, students starting later, a typical ERD time at elementary, which had typically been 1:45 to 3:15, next year will switch to 2 o'clock to 3:10. So about 35 minutes less per ERD session next year. Again, that's not meant to create a diversion around plan time piece, but it is a unique factor that's going on at elementary school next year by virtue of the push of student start time, but the adjustment of contract time does end up shortening time available for ERD.
So, Bo, can you see the document?
No, because I can hardly do
Okay.
one thing at once, much less two things at once.
Okay.
I think I've got it, Jim. I added something to it. So
I am well established as the worst chart language sharer in the world, and it's a mantle I'm not about to give up.
And Bo, you can't even pull the rookie card anymore. So
Oh no, I just wear it with shame.
Hey, Dave. Hey, Dave, I think the only thing that you might add to the end of your sentence there is it does shorten their time for ERD by 35 minutes.
Thank you.
Dave Lockley, you were going to say something earlier?
I was just going to basically say the same thing Bo did.
All right.
The only thing I would add to that, I'll add during my part of story.
Okay, Heather?
I'll pass.
Dorman?
I'll pass.
Nancy? Laura?
A 30-minute push 5 days a week would create 150 extra minutes. And then also, I don't know if it's actually story, but I liked what Darren said about time for teachers can still be time for students. I don't know if that's story or not, but I just wanted to say that.
Okay, Laura, let's go one at a time here. Would create how many extra minutes?
Say that one more time.
The 30-minute push 5 days a week would create how many extra minutes?
150.
Thank you.
No.
Probably could have figured that out myself, but I wanted to hear it from you. And
That's
then
okay. I used the calculator to check mine too.
Yeah, and then the second part you said that you wanted to, that might be part of the story is?
What Darren said was the time for teachers can still be time for students. I liked that a lot.
Fingers aren't working. Sorry, guys. All right, I'm ready, Jim.
So we have about 10 minutes left. Dave Lockley?
That our K-8 buildings do not have the same amount of non-instructional time as elementary schools during the day. It varies slightly from building to building. So I don't want to quote a bunch of numbers, but they just don't have the same amount of non-instructional time as our elementary or our middles. It's less.
And it's non-instructional, right?
Yes.
So if you have something that you wish to add today to story, raise your hand, please. Michelle,
I feel like I need to clarify something. I don't know if this is even, you can tell me to be quiet. That's fine.
We won't tell you to be quiet. It's okay.
150 minutes weren't created. They were just moved to a different part of the day.
I'm good with that. You can adjust mine to match that.
And how do you suggest I do that?
You could just say that
150.
30-minute push moves 150 minutes to the morning.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you, Shelley.
anyone else for right now?
Marty has his hand up, Jim.
Oh, yeah. Marty, I have a tough time seeing that. I see the blue hands, but I don't see the one that you keep raising. So thank you.
It's all right. I'm surrounded by flesh-colored items. I think adding on to what Shelley said about the minutes moving, I think the difference is the language in the proposed language in changing contact day to contract day. So in a way it's created because those minutes didn't exist that could be counted for as planning time because it was outside the contact day. So just a note and clarification. I don't know if that makes a difference, but.
So could you put that in chart language for me, Marty?
Nope.
Okay, I'm done.
Changing contact day to contract day does increase available minutes.
And what kind of minutes did you say does increase?
Available non-instructional minutes.
Thanks for your patience, Marty. I appreciate that.
Chris.
Yeah, mine's just a question to Mila. If there's anything that you saw as you got survey feedback from principals, anything there that you feel like needs to be added to story?
I think it's represented in the fact that changes made to minutes have impact that we haven't anticipated or fully thought through at secondary, and it's been captured.
Michelle, back to you.
I just have a question. I need to know for my own understanding and all of this, what those minutes were before we changed. I mean, what were those contract minutes before we changed them to be called? I just don't understand what were those minutes? They were always non-instructional minutes in my contract. I need somebody to answer that question.
So Michelle, I think it's contact day means anytime you could have been in contact teaching students. And so that after school time couldn't be considered because the students weren't in session. And now that it's contract day, those minutes can be considered plan time because they've changed it, whether the kids are there or not. I think that's how I understood it.
Okay,
Dave?
so but even though that was my contract time, I could have been shopping on the internet, or I mean, I'm having a hard time understanding.
I think they're changing language to match somewhat what was actually happening, maybe.
My understanding, and Dave, sorry.
That's fine. Go ahead.
So the minutes that were after students left the building couldn't be counted towards the 225 of planning time. And so I think by changing that allows that time to be, or the time before school now with the bell change, to be used as being considered part of the 225.
The only thing I would add is that it could be part of your schedule to be considered part of your 225. Not making any one particular block saying this has to be your 225 is one of the big differences in the language, because, and I know I'm rehashing a little bit of our old conversations, you know, when we look at the different intents of time and structures for planning that have been established, one of the big issues that this plan was trying to address was the need to have things like DDI meetings, facilitated plannings, that kind of stuff that were ran by or participated with either an administrator or a coach. And by having those blocks only available after the school day, that meant every team had to meet at the same block of time. But that was also when co-curriculars and a lot of other activities were happening. And so what happened throughout the system, not necessarily at Meridian, was that those meetings then got pushed into the plan time day and also after school. And it became this, I can't identify, this is my actual time. I can guarantee that I'm going to have this week to do my own designated plan time, to schedule out the things I need to do, whether it's SLOs, working with my team, making phone calls, whatever it is to do. And that inconsistency was creating a lot of stress and pressure in the systems in a large number of our buildings. Obviously, not every one of our buildings. Every building had different needs and different structures. And so, like I said, the only clarifier difference I would say is that it gives that all blocks of the day within the teacher contract day have the potential of being scheduled as the designated plan period for an individual or group of teachers. And not saying that any one block has to be, but it can be scheduled as plan time, designated self-directed plan time.
Sandy, you've had your hand up for a bit. Sandy, you're still muted. Did you want to add the story today before we check out?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to navigate this on my phone. Well, Lara said that the 30-minute push would add plan time, and then Marty and Bo seemed to give two different said they wouldn't. So it's not story, that's a fact that needs to be cleared up. It does or it doesn't. Can somebody figure that out?
So the short answer is they're both right. Everybody's right. So by pushing 30 minutes on a Wednesday and shortening the length of ERD, it does theoretically create more plan time for and less ERD time in any one given week. Because by moving that 30 minutes to the beginning of the day, you're shifting that 30 minutes from ERD time to what potentially could be scheduled as a block of time for planning on any one given week. And Laura's also correct, and everyone else is correct, that it creates more blocks of time for which planning time can be held sacred in the week. So more available options so that you can schedule the meetings that need to be scheduled for the betterment of students and still have your scheduled blocks of time. So it opens up the availability of scheduling so that you can have that consistent regular schedule. So everyone is, the way I heard it, everyone is saying the right thing, just different parts of the full of a larger, more complex explanation. It's the problem with trying to put things into chart language on a an incredibly complex topic.
So I have about less than a minute left. We're going to come back to this on Monday, spend some more time with Story, and then move on through the process. So if Dave and Mila could stay on for me for just a bit after, who would like to start a checkout that's very brief? Mila,
I'll go with 3 words. Back on track.
Sandy Sorensen. 3 words.
Well, first, I apologize, everybody. The only times that were available for me to sign up to clean out my classroom were any day during bargaining. So I'm really sorry. I really was listening. But I'm going to go with Mila and say back on track.
Linda,
Good work done.
Allison,
I hope we finish this next time. I know that's more than 3 words, but.
Teresa,
Great progress.
Deborah,
Progress.
Shelley,
Keep on trucking.
Heather,
We're moving forward.
Bo,
Getting there.
Colleen,
Process works.
Chris,
Trust the process.
Heather,
I was going to say the same thing. Trust the process.
Norman,
See you soon.
Nancy,
Sorry. The process works.
Laura,
Love you guys.
Dave,
We're getting there.
Marty,
Good reset.
Laura, Mitchell,
Feels much better.
Darren,
Much better today.
Kathy,
Thank you, professionals.
Matt,
Moving right along.
Dave,
Great work, guys.
be safe. I'll see you on Monday.